Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. You're watching TechStrong TV. Today's Monday, October 12th. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope everyone's well, safe, ready for another week at work. Of course, there's so much going on in the tech world. It's amazing. Because most of us, we watch news or read news, and we see, so much suffering, both, physically with health and everything, as well as economically. But yet the tech world, there's so much going on. There's so much changes, so much big news. IBM spinning off a new company, Nuco for now, which is going to probably have about $19 billion in revenue. It really represents sort of a lot of the old legacy IBM business, which, has been around for 100 years. And then, they're going to take Red Hat, their hybrid cloud, and a lot of, that kind of business, high margin business, and keep that as kind of the new IBM. Big story. We cover it. Charlene will tell you more about it in around news stories. But just so much, and that's the tip of the iceberg. IPOs, mergers and acquisitions, new products, new product categories. It's amazing. While in the midst of everything going on in the world, it's almost been a catalyst in the tech world for more change, more innovation, more growth. So, count our blessings for that if you're in tech and you're watching this. And let's keep it going, because so much depends on us, being able to deliver. Let me tell you, we've got a nice show in store today. We've got a couple of feature videos, and as well as, the news and webinar preview, and a lot of great interviews. Let me tell you what we have in store. First of all, I'm happy I've got Simon Crosby on today. Simon, if you don't know, was one of the key people behind the Zen hypervisor, which was eventually it was open source and an enterprise version. It was eventually the enterprise piece, anyway, was eventually acquired, and but what was the Zen open source really became the hypervisor behind AWS's cloud. So when we look at AWS cloud, it's pretty amazing. That's kind of Zen at its genesis there. So Simon was a key person in that. Before moving on, the next company he started was Bromium, which kind of pioneered the idea of micro VM, micro perimeters for security. It's pretty revolutionary, and it's still in use today and across a lot of different use cases. And then Simon, I want to say it's a year ago, maybe a year and a half, went over to Swim.ai. Swim, again, another open source and commercial, open core business model. And what they're doing is, rather than, going through data, passing it into storage and then analyzing it, they're providing analysis on the fly, if you will, right? And the amount of data that they're able to do this to is phenomenal. In the interview, Simon tells us it's something like 4 petabytes a day or something like that, which is hard to get your head around. It's like multiple Facebook's worth of data they're analyzing every day. So we catch up with Simon. He tells us all what's Swim. I think version 4.0 just came out, and Simon's going to tell us all about it. After that, we're going to check back in on a story we've been following for a few months, and that is the Call for Code project for 2020. Call for Code it's always, been a project now. Linux Foundation and IBM are two of the main sponsors of it. And we've been following Daniel Crook, CTO for IBM for Call for Code, as well as the folks at Altran, who were one of the finalists in this year's event. And we're coming near the end now. I think next week, or tomorrow actually, is the Call for Code finale. But we're going to check in with Mark Ritzman and Ronnie Malfer from Altran, as well as Daniel Crook from IBM, about what's been going on with their entry in the Call for Code. interesting stuff. You'll hear more about it. Then after that, we're going to be back on with Rachel Opsler. Rachel has been with us before. She's VP Product over at PagerDuty. PagerDuty, speaking of mergers and acquisitions, right? They recently acquired Rundeck. My friend Damon Edwards and Alex Honor. Congratulations to Damon and Alex, now part of the PagerDuty team. And PagerDuty recently did a survey around what they've been seeing, which is kind of unprecedented demand and usage. Rachel's going to tell us all about that. And then that's going to be it from my interviews today. Then we've got a great Gary Berman episode of the Cyber Hero Adventure Show. And Gary has on his show today Mario Volkskin from Reversing Labs, and Mark Orsi from Global Resilience Federation. So that'll be a good one. Gary puts a lot into these shows. If you haven't seen them yet, you're in for a treat. After that, we're going to do my own cybersecurity show. Of course, it's the CISO Talk. My co-host there is Matt Newfield, CISO at Unisys, and we're joined as always by Mitch Ashley, CEO, Accelerated Strategies Group. And our guest today is Miranda Ritchie from IBM. And we're going to take a good look at healthcare, cybersecurity in a COVID world, about what we're seeing, issues in healthcare, cybersecurity, specifically to healthcare, with everything going on with COVID. After that, Charlene will be on and she'll give us the news. And then Charlene has an interview today with Ofer Han Chen of Hunters on their latest report, The Importance of Threat Hunting Automation for XDR. And she'll also give us a webinar preview. We've got some great webinars lined up this week on Media Ops. And then I'll be back to introduce Mitch for the Analyst Corner. And, on the story about IBM spinning out Nuco, Mitchell is going to give us his views on that. And he was quoted in a bunch of articles and what's happening there. And then Mitchell also has an interview with Paul Magal, President, Business Applications and Technology Outsourcing Division at CGS. And they're going to talk about drastic changes happening in supply chains as companies adjust from inventory-based to on-demand-based supply chains, which COVID kind of really throws a wrench into. But Mitchell has that. I'll be back to say goodbye. It is an amazing show for a Monday. We hope you're ready for it. This is Alan Schimmel. We're going to take a quick commercial break and we'll be right back. I first met Simon Crosby when he was starting up Bromium. Actually, it might have been before Bromium. It was when Zen was purchased, was acquired, Zen Enterprise. And then he left there and then shortly after started up Bromium. But Simon is one of the most influential CTOs in the technology space and has been for some time. Brilliant fellow. He moved over to Swim.ai, which is an open core project and company about a year and a half ago. And they are just doing amazing things with data analysis on the fly at the edge for the most part. And the amount of data and the kinds of projects they're working on is just phenomenal. They just recently released, I believe it's version 4.0 of Swim, of the platform. Simon's going to tell us about it and more. He's a treasure. So I hope you enjoy this. Simon Crosby, CTO at Swim.ai.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another segment here for TechStrong TV. My guest this segment is a friend I've had the pleasure of meeting and interviewing, and back when we used to do conferences in person, I met him many times in person at conferences. Simon Crosby. Simon, welcome to TechStrong.
Thank you. It's great to see you again.
It's great to see you. Unfortunately, not in person, but at least we're alive. So that's a good thing. Simon, look, our audience is about digital transformation, cloud transformation, DevOps, cloud native, and cybersecurity.
Yeah.
For many, the name Simon Crosby is not new, but for those who
That's bad.
for those who may not be familiar with Simon Crosby, though, give us a little of your own personal
Well,
story.
you and I met when I was doing the Zen hypervisor years and
Yep.
years ago. So
Hmm.
2005-ish, 6-ish. And
Yeah.
I guess that helped make Amazon, right? So
Huh?
hypervisors, and then hypervisors for security in Bromium was my next startup that got sold to HP
Yep.
last year. And Swim is totally awesome. We'll talk about real-time streaming data today.
Excellent. And yeah, I mean, and for those, Simon, the older I get, the more I forget. But people look at Amazon and hypervisors, and they think VMware or KVTs and stuff. Some may not realize just how big Zen was. Right? There was Zen, the open source sort of hypervisor project, which is kind of what Amazon kind of grew, AWS used. And then, of course, you were there when the Zen was bought by Citrix, right? And
Well,
that led.
along the way, we ended up working with Microsoft. So
Yes.
we ended up helping Microsoft build Hyper-V, doing
Yeah.
all the open source pieces of that. And so Zen was a big deal.
Then, I mean, it ushered in the whole cloud and virtualization. And then, my background in security, Bromium was sort of revolutionary when we had people like the Jericho Project talking about the disappearance of the perimeter,
Exactly.
the moat
So,
and castle.
the
Remember
cool
those?
thing, yeah, oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. And Alan, all the micro VM stuff that we did at Bromium got licensed to Microsoft, and it's now in Windows 10.
Really?
It's
I
also
wasn't
in
aware.
it's also in Azure, and everything that Azure does for what they call it containers on Hyper-V, Hyper-V containers. That's
Mhm.
all using micro VMs. So
Oh, I
sure,
wasn't
it's
aware.
fun.
Absolutely. But it brought about real change in security. We started seeing the idea of micro VMs, micro perimeters, right? Individual perimeters. And of course, now with COVID and all of us working from home and remotely, we right, we
Right.
need those micro perimeters and those micro VMs again. And like we never stop needing them. But that's history, right? About I want to say a year and a half, not quite 2 years ago, you became CTO at Swim. And
Yes.
let's start there. I don't know if our audience is familiar with Swim and the whole edge computing and everything else. So let's give them a quick background on Swim, Simon.
Cool beans. And actually, today is a fabulous day because we just released version 4 of our product, Swim
Great.
Continuum. So Swim is an open core solution for massive applications, distributed applications that process real-time streaming data to give continuous intelligence. So what do we mean by that? These are applications that always know the answer. They can't afford the time to store data and then analyze it later. So if I'm to point at a big trend that I see, it's that this big data trend, and we just saw Snowflake IPO, this notion of big data is all about store and then analyze. And for a ton of applications, that's too slow. And Swim plays there, where you process data as it arrives, you analyze, learn, and predict on the fly, and so you always have an answer.
I mean, again, another leap in terms of how we're able to do this, and taking yet another, like the book, The Goal. As soon as we remove one bottleneck, we find the next, and this is the bottleneck now that we at right where we were store and analyze. Now we want to analyze as we store or analyze, part of it.
Yeah, so let me give you a good reason why that's the case.
Hmm.
Moore's law may be petering out, but my goodness, it's delivered a ton of goodness. So here's some numbers for you. If you compare your CPU and memory, so computing on the fly, never storing anything, to hitting a network, say, or going to disk or database in the cloud. It's like this. The computer cycle time, 1 nanosecond per instruction, is about like an F-18, okay? By comparison, going to a database is a snail. Yeah. Literally, okay? F-18 goes 1,600 kilometers an hour, and a snail goes half a meter per hour. It's 1,000,000 times faster. Okay, so if you can keep compute in memory and run at CPU and memory speeds and not store stuff, that's really you're winning. And
Agreed.
And by the way, it's better aligned with a lot of human processes. So if you need to know now, whether you hit the brakes or not, or how to optimize a thing or deal with a fault, then you just don't have the time to wait hours for a store and analyze process to run.
So Simon, I think speed, automation are things that our audience understands, right? As developers, as computer people, we know, right, how important that is. Yep. Let's talk a little bit, if you can. How is SWIM achieving this? What's the? I'm not asking you to give away secrets, obviously, but
no. So
what's the sauce here? It's open core anyway. You're right. So how do we do it? How do you do it?
So there's nothing new in computing ever. Okay, it's all been done, and so SWIM is a reincarnation of a model which, gosh, goes back 60 years to Erlang, the actor model. Okay, so the actor model basically says that for everything, you have a little concurrent process running, in our case, millions of these concurrently running, consuming their own data and evolving in memory, okay? And so instead of storing state in a database and having to read it back all the time, using the model of the cloud, which is stateless computing and put all the state in a database, you have the stateful actors in memory. We call them web agents because, hey, they're on the web. And they're concurrently running, and they're running continuously, analyzing, predicting, and learning from their own data and streaming the results out. And so SWIM is a reincarnation of the actor model. People will be familiar with it in the form of Akka and the reactive paradigm. SWIM is really just focused on dealing with streaming data specifically, and eventual consistency model for data correctness. And that's what we do. So SWIM web agents are the core, and we have one web agent per source of data. They get dynamically created. They automatically process and analyze their own raw data, and then they link to each other to form relationships. And the relationships are the sorts of things you find in raw data, like containment or proximity, or even things like predicted to be within. And based on these relationships, these web agents link to each other, and linking is like a sub. It lets them see each other's data and use that in their own calculations.
Excellent. Now, Simon, scale, right? It's nice to be able to do this here, there, but we spoke a little bit off camera about just the scale of the, I mean, really the sheer numbers of data. Share with our audience. What do we? I mean, you give me some comparisons.
So our largest customer is a mobile provider, and for them we process about 4 petabytes worth of data per day. You couldn't afford to store that, by the way.
No.
So we analyze, predict, learn, and predict from this on the fly for more than 150 million mobile devices and all their base sessions to allow them to continually optimize connection quality for all their devices in their network. So the amounts of information are literally staggering. But let me give you this. Their previous process involved a Hadoop store and analyze process where they were selectively storing a ton of data. About 400 nodes of Hadoop, okay? But moving to an in-memory architecture where we throw away the raw data the moment we process it, they get to move down to 40 nodes. And instead of getting insights on a 10-hour timescale, they're getting them in 10 milliseconds. So if anything could really tackle the cloud, it is this notion that REST and databases, which has made the cloud what it is today, really does not keep up with the staggering growth of information from the real world, right? And if you can change the model to something which is stateful, you can go 1,000,000 times faster at about 10% of the cost.
And that's exactly it. We're taking 400 Hadoop, cluster 400 Hadoop instances to 40. Yeah, a tenth. And was it 4 petabytes a day? Is that what you said?
Yeah, 4 petabytes. By the way, that's a Facebook's worth of data every day.
Yeah. I mean, and again, our audience is technical. They understand what 4 petabytes are, but
no, I think those are Carl Sagan numbers, right? Billions and billions, and it's
10 to the 15. It's big.
It's hard to get your head around that number. It's a crazy number.
The question, I guess, is: are we losing anything in qualitatively doing it that way? Right? Are we throwing out any babies in that bathwater that we're not storing?
So it's very interesting. So here's an idea that I had the other day. So it's poorly formed, and I apologize for that up front. When we think about, people think about storing data for all time because then they'll have absolute fidelity, right? The problem is you don't have the time or the capacity to go through all that data historically. The way I think of learning is that it is the way that we appropriately summarize the past in a useful way for the future. So let me try this on you. Do you like blueberry muffins?
Love them.
Right.
Low fat if possible, but
notice you didn't have to phone your mom, right? So you didn't have to reach out to a database and say, hey, do I like blueberry muffins? You just knew. You'd summarized in some way all the blueberry muffins from your past into a way to deal with the fact that I might offer you one right now. And so I think of learning as kind of an appropriate summarization. It's a very terse statement. It's a very compact statement of the past that's useful for the future. And so what these actors do, these web agents, is they analyze, learn, and predict from their own data and everything they can see. And then they have a way of reasoning about their future. So let me give you a good example. We're widely deployed in a bunch of US cities where every intersection continually analyzes, learns, and predicts from its own data, plus the data of its surroundings. So all the intersections, say within a 1,000-yard radius, okay? And so each intersection sees a very small part of the world, and then it can predict. Now, these are very small and very terse neural networks, and they're very compact, and you can execute them very efficiently. And so a city, instead of having a big model up in the cloud someplace, basically has 1,000 or 2,000 small models, each of which is predicting for itself. So these little digital twins of things, these digital twins of intersections, are learning and predicting for themselves based on their entire past, given what they can see. And that's kind of cool. And so the consumer for that is something like an Uber or a Google or whatever, which is looking to route vehicles better through a city.
Got it. And of course, with this kind of model comes continuous learning, and the more information that's analyzed and decisions made, the better it theoretically the better it is going forward. So it's like continually improving.
Right, but that continually improving, but also I think there's something to be said about this in terms of how we ought to expect continuous improvement to enter our worlds. So let me posit for you two worlds. One is that there will be a data scientist up in the cloud who will make a great model for you of your city, and then we'll push it to the edge and it'll be magic, right? The other one is that these little smart analytical digital twins of things, which we call web agents, will learn for themselves and continuously analyze, learn, and predict. And that's scalable in the sense that we don't really need a data scientist to make that happen. They're simple models. Modest improvements make the world better. And so they continuously analyze, learn, and predict, a little bit like you, right? You wander around the world and you analyze, learn, and predict. And so I'm kind of the view now that a scalable way of getting these AI technologies out into the world is not by having bazillions of data scientists to build magical models up in the cloud with lots and lots of data, but to have actors, web agents, which continuously process the data they can see, right, from their worlds.
Sure, absolutely. I find it fascinating stuff. Simon, you mentioned at the top that you guys just released Swim 4.0.
Yeah.
I think today or so. Talk to us. 4.0 sounds like a major new release, not a minor. So 4.0.
Sure.
What do you got there?
So remember, we're an open core company. The core is Swim OS, which is everything you would need to build a massive distributed application for processing real-time data. Okay, what do we add to that in Swim Continuum? We add all of the ilities. It sounds terrible to say. So reliability, scalability, persistence, security, and all of the things an enterprise wants when they're going to deploy an infrastructure at scale. We also add very powerful tools for visualization and response to things which are changing. So if you go to traffic.swim.ai, you will see an in-browser rendering of the current state of Palo Alto, California. And as you click on elements of that, you will literally, in your browser, see the current real-time state. What I mean by that is that there are very powerful graphical utilities which subscribe to these web agents directly, so that whenever they change, your max half RTT between you and Palo Alto out of date. Okay, so you get to see things actually changing in real time. And so visualization tools and the ability to rapidly create compelling visual experiences is a key part of what we provide our customers.
Absolutely. The scary thing, it sounds like you're just scratching the surface. There's so many more places where this can go.
It's fun. I'm certainly of the view that stop. ARM is now shipping 20 billion cores per year.
Wow.
Okay, that's
Think about
2 million things an hour are showing up, and they all have a bunch to say, right? So the challenge that the enterprise faces is that this gap, which is really just physics, the gap which Moore's law creates versus storage of any type, memory, but increasingly remote databases and everything else, it's just too big. And so we have to be able to glean facts on the fly from vast amounts of data. And do we have to store all the raw data? Yeah, probably not.
Crazy. Simon, we're about out of time, but I'm so glad to see you. You've latched onto another small problem to deal with. Right?
It's always a privilege to spend time with you. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Just for people who want it, it's swim.ai, and
Right.
there's this. It's an open core, so there's the swim engine, and then.
And if you go to swimos.org, you'll find a ton of open source examples that you can use to go off and build your own real-time streaming apps.
Excellent. Simon, it's a pleasure to see you. Great to hear from you. Great to hear about this great work you're doing. It is. I'm excited listening to it. Keep it up. Don't stay away so long. Come back and keep us posted here.
All right. Thank you, Alan.
All righty. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We'll be back with another guest in a moment.
CI/CD pipe and put your observability on. Ground control to Major Tom.
10, 9.
Commencing countdown, engines on.
6, 5.
Check ignition and may God's love be with you.
You know, the Call for Code project's been going on for a couple of years. Every year it's a new theme, a new bunch of entries, and new winners announced. Of course, 2020 kind of took over Call for Code this year, and what was their theme moved or had to be share the spotlight with COVID, like everything else. We've been following the Call for Code this year for months. And we got another update for you today. We're joined again by Daniel Kirk, Field CTO for Call for Code for IBM, as well as Ronnie Malfer and Mark Ritzman from Altran, which is one of the 3 finalists in this year's Call for Code contest. And we've been following, Altran, Mark, along with Daniel on this for some time, and Ronnie's here to give us an update. So I believe the finale is tomorrow. You might want to check that out under Call for Code. And let's now check in with our friends and see what's happening.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another episode here for TechStrong TV. Got a good episode here. It's a kind of continuing story we've been following now, I think almost since the beginning of 2020, maybe around January, February, March, certainly. Let me introduce you to our guest for this episode, or for this segment, and let them tell their story a little bit, and we'll bring her from there. We're going to start with Daniel Kirk. Daniel, why don't you introduce yourself, but also introduce the whole project and the whole, background here.
Sure. So today we're going to talk about Call for Code. So it's a 5-year initiative we started in 2018. It's got a yearly multi-month competition. We just wrapped our 3rd year. So in about a week, on October 13th, we're going to have an awards ceremony. It's a virtual event. We encourage you to sign up and check out all the new amazing technology that's been created over the last year for taking technology and addressing the pandemic, the social and business aspects of the pandemic, as well as climate change, which was our original theme. And I'm very excited to hear about the latest from the team from Altran, which created an application that we recognized early in the pandemic. Normally we recognize applications in the third quarter, but in May, we recognized them as one of the top 3 most promising ideas to come through the competition this year.
And of course, Daniel, you're Daniel Crook, VP of IBM and in charge of the Call for Code project, right?
I wish I was VP. I am the
All
Chief
right, I gave
Technology
you a
Officer.
promotion. Yeah. CP, excuse me.
Yes,
right.
yeah, I lead the program, so I get to see all the great applications come through, and I help mentor some of the teams to actually take their applications that they create for the competition and deliver them in the field. So that's what sets Call for Code apart. Is it's not just tech for good and you get a prize and everybody goes home. There's a continuing engine, an incubation of the ideas, making sure folks get the right technology resources, the right mentorship, and the right ecosystem connections to take their idea and make it real.
Excellent. Just let them know I gave you a field promotion, put a little something extra in the end of the month there for you. But thanks, Daniel, and great job with the project. Ronnie, Mark, I'd like to introduce you two, and we'll give a chance to give you each of your background and a little bit about the project you're working on. Ronnie, why don't you go first?
Thank you, Alan. Thanks for inviting us here. My name is Ronnie Maffa. I am the VP of Engineering in Altron. I lead delivery at the Altron company, which is now a Capgemini company. Mark?
Excellent. So you really are a VP. I knew sooner or later we'd run into a VP here.
By all means, you can give me a promotion as well. I welcomed it.
So, look, if it doesn't come out of my budget, it's all good. Mark, welcome back. You've been here before, but give us a little background.
Thanks, Alan. Happy to be back. Thank you for having us. I'm a solution architect with Altron. I'm also not a VP, so if you're handing those things out.
Like candy.
It's a pleasure to be back. And when we spoke in May, as Daniel said, we had to submit a solution, and we did an extremely fast sprint to get the solution submitted and the 9 parts of the application. And we were honored to be tagged as one of the 3 fast-track solutions. So since then, there's been a lot of work going on and a lot of advancement in the platform. I think the last time I talked, I said we'd be back later in the summer with an update. So I'm sorry for being tardy. It's been a busy summer, but what we lack in responsiveness we'll make up for in content, because I'm delighted that Ronnie is here. The people on our team actually are in Ronnie's group. So she's been very instrumental in mentoring them and coaching them and guiding the solution. So we're both really pleased to be here and very eager to talk about what we've done and how happy we are to be part of Call for Code.
Great. We're going to jump into the Altran project in a second. Daniel, I know you mentioned that it's not just like you win a prize or even a cash award, right? The solutions that come out of this kind of get the full weight of IBM as well as other partners involved behind them for the winning projects, which are then, and I'm doing this from memory, so if I'm wrong, correct me, but the projects are open sourced and available to other people, and organizations to use. They're around a theme, as you mentioned. This year's theme kind of morphed from climate change to COVID, and because it was in our face, right, when we got this, and did I do it justice, or what else? What's another reason why you want to what goes into the winners here?
Yeah, you captured the theme, right? So the goal of Call for Code, the overall program, is really to help pull out sustainable open source projects regardless of the theme. So in the past 2 years, it was focused more narrowly on natural disasters, disaster resiliency. This year, we added the one track for climate change, which includes disaster resiliency as well as water and energy sustainability. And we added this COVID theme as well. So regardless of what the theme is, we work with the Linux Foundation as a key partner in Call for Code. And they help us mentor and provide support for the teams. The top teams is the one that we really focus on, but each of the teams that places in the top 5 or has some really promising technology has equal access to the Linux Foundation to learn about how to build a community around the project. So for each of the projects we see, they don't come necessarily to competition with a fully baked, ready to go open source project at the end of it, but we work with them to understand how they best want to bring that technology to the world, how to foster a community, and how to support innovation built on top of that. So the core tenet really is getting folks to look at the real pressing problems, develop technology that everybody can use.
Great. Ronnie, as the one lone true VP here, I'm going to ask you to describe the Altec. And it's funny, Mark, I think when you were on last, you weren't part of Capgemini at that point, right?
I think it was in the works, and it's advanced through the summer, and it continues to advance, and they're making announcements little by little. So I believe at that point we knew about it, but it's further along now.
We're talking about.
So, Ronnie, I'd like you to talk about what was the winning project here. Give us a little background on it, why your company chose to do this, what's important about it, and then we can get into progress.
Okay, thank you. So the project that has received the recognition from the IBM team is called Are You Well? And let me first start talking about why we get into this. So, we are a partner of the IBM company, and, Call for Code is really have an incredible mission. Aside from bringing together a lot of innovator, sort of kind of jazz them up, on their creative thinking to solve a problem that the community is experiencing. It in itself is a noble mission, one would say. And for us particularly, COVID is something that really was so present to everybody's mind. Our team at the same time experiencing, the changes of what COVID is causing to their own life. They see their family, they see their friends, they see the media sharing how, a global pandemic is sort of affecting everyone. And when we heard that IBM is bringing together, this change of call to action, we thought, why not channel our creativity, our ingenuity to really, be part of a community of solution provider. When I say solution is truly, I don't think anybody understand what is the final answer to sort of combat COVID, but there are just so many challenges everybody is facing. So we thought, why not? It's nothing like putting your sort of capability to good use. So our team really stepped into this, wanting to channel our technical ability and, to help everyone just so that they can feel like we are doing something to fight back. And so what did we actually build? So, we spend a little time, like I always said, nothing like a deadline to motivate a decision-making process. So, when we sort of think about this, we get approximately 3.5 weeks and maybe a little bit more than that for the prototype submission. Because, once we get our mind to it, we want to submit a solution that we can be proud of. And we actually want it to be high value, right? So, so we did a very quick sprint and then we get ourselves starting to work. We decided the program to really empower individual to take control of the situation, to take care of their health, to be well, to know that they are well. So given that the application was built, it is a platform as well as a application, and we applied it to the three personas that we thought about is the patient, the medical team, as well as the facility that support us.
Excellent. Now, Mark, you guys was it 2-week sprints?
Yeah, the original sprint was, as Ronnie said, I think we first became involved at the end of March or beginning of April. And the deadline for submission, I believe, is April 29th. So we quickly mustered, and Daniel and his team were incredibly supportive in explaining the program, in explaining the IBM assets that we could use and have exposure to, and training us on those assets. So we took a couple days to come up to speed on that. We then went into a rapid ideation phase where we were having daily virtual stand-ups online. Once we settled on the idea and single-threaded on that, as Ronnie likes to say, it was 7 days from idea to code. And then we whipped together the prototype, which included architectural diagrams, a roadmap, screenshots, promotional videos, abstracts, all those 9 elements, and that's what we submitted on April 29th. I believe the announcement was at the Think conference on May 4th. We were notified we were one of the 3 fast tracks. We then took a breath for about 6 hours, and then launched into another series of sprints and continued to work on it up until this point with the team that Ronnie coached internally, with support from Daniel and his team.
Excellent. Now, you guys were on, Daniel, was it May?
Yeah, probably
You were
around
on last week, around Mark, yeah. And so Mark, since then, it's mid-May, mid-June, mid-July, mid-August, mid-September. My back of the napkin tells me, you got about 4.5 months or 2 weeks. You should have done maybe 8 sprints. Is that about right, you think, or?
Does that sound about right, Ronnie?
Yeah, give and take.
So what progress have we made?
Sure. So I'll start off now, kick it over to Ronnie. If you remember, one of the things interesting is, as Ronnie was saying, if you think about where we were in March and April, and Ronnie and I are both in the Northeast, and we were shell-shocked and reacting to this, and we were seeing images of hospitals being set up in Central Park and temporary hospitals and things like that. The design of the application as a multi-sided platform. So we built the platform and the infrastructure from the start as an enterprise application. So scalability, resiliency, extensibility. We built it as a multi-sided platform, knowing that as things progressed and different things occurred, use cases might change as well. So the original use case was to connect patients with facilities, reduce the burden on the facilities, perhaps treat people outside of facilities, facilitate the information exchange, and as Ronnie said, create that peace of mind that you're doing something. It's been interesting to see and happy to see how things have progressed and how different use cases and different things are now moving to the forefront. And we always had that in mind with our design point that this would occur. So we can easily connect different populations and instantiate different logic. And that's what we've been looking at from a use case perspective. So Daniel mentioned there are some healthcare providers that have platforms. We can extend their platform. We're looking at drug trials. We're looking at connecting researchers to patients. We also looked at essential services and things like that. So from a use case perspective, it's kind of advanced that way. The platform's still holding up. So the work that we did is work more on the platform, advance the platform. We did some additional work on the UI, UX to make sure the transaction between the two is frictionless. Transaction is not the right word. The interchange is frictionless. And then we also took a look at additional IBM assets around analytics and around machine learning and around artificial intelligence to implement that in the platform as well and just make the whole thing work better, faster, stronger. And I'll flip it over to Ronnie for more details now.
Yeah, so thank you for that well set up. So, we roughed out a solution at the very beginning, and we spent a lot of time and made a lot of progress building our platform that is what I would call production grade. There's a big difference between something working and something working in production environment. We improve all the usability, scalability, deployability. It all sounds somewhat boring, but it's just so fundamentally critical for to enable anyone to adopt it, and also really built in many feedback that we have heard from our user study that we have consistently infused into the system as we, every single iteration, we have an end user point of view from all the persona we are working. Like Mark said, at the very beginning, we knew that, the application of this platform can be quite vast. So one of the way, speaking as a delivery person, a little geeky, the best way to really know whether you build a platform that is flexible is to actually put it to task. So what we also have done during this time is we started in probably the past 3 iteration that we are starting to adapt it to implement a back to work scenario. Because right now, if you really think about what's pressing. I think, the information out in the world about COVID is not any more clear. There's still a lot of confusion, a lot of data out there. The resource, whether it's available or not, that is still a challenge. So the original use case continue to be very applicable. However, what is happening is now we are beginning to, and at another very quick transition point, we are now transitioning to how do we get back to work? How do we get back to school? And, so we thought that let's see if we can actually easily adapt it. So what we have done is that instead of a patient, we think about employee. Instead of a medical professional, we think about your manager, your HR, or your facility planner. How do we enable an individual to be able to, before they step into the car, to know that whether I should get to the site and got tested in the front of the building to find out whether I really should be entering the building or not? How do I allow myself to schedule time? How does a facility individual can ensure that there is no more people showing up at the front desk than they really can capable of allowing them? So honestly, we spent time working on that, and so far the platform been holding up pretty nicely. So I'm hoping that in another 2 or 3 iteration, we will also be deploying that particular solution as well.
Excellent, excellent. Daniel, how does COVID year, non-COVID year, how does this shape up to what you've seen in previous years?
Yeah, and I do want to, and that connects to what Ronnie and Mark just said. When we recognized this application, we also had the long term in mind. It wasn't just an immediate response to the pandemic. It was, are these applications that we're looking at, do they have legs to go forward as a sustainable project, whether they pivot or adapt to circumstances? So I think that was a really great aspect of what they built. And it's amazing just if you compare what was built this year versus prior years, just to see the variety of applications coming from lots of different organizations, whether it's individual developers like the startup that won the first year, Project Owl, whether it was a public-private partnership with last year's winner, Prometeo, with firefighters connected with data scientists, full-stack developers, and here with one of our great partners who is using their skills, their expertise in the medical vertical to actually build applications that can go beyond. They'll build the skills on their team and also be something that makes a difference in the world. So what's just amazing, and it happens every year around this time of year, is just seeing how much great stuff comes from lots of different sources in unexpected ways, but really has an amazing impact and really inspires, I think, developers to keep coming back year after year and take part in the competitions.
Excellent. Guys, I'm looking at my watch here. We're about out of time. But we didn't give out web links or anything for people to get more information. Overall, call for code is it callforcode.com? I forget, Daniel.
Yeah, there's 2 sites. So there's the overall partner website, which is callforcode.org. That's with the Linux Foundation, with IBM, David Clark Cause, and others. And then there's the IBM resources for developers. And you'll find a link either way to the award ceremony next week, which you can hear about lots of different great applications that came through this year and highlight the amazing stuff that's happened.
Sure. Mark and Ronnie, can you give us some information about your company as well as the project itself?
Sure. So Altron is a research and engineering firm. Natively, we had about 10,000 employees. We operate around the globe in a number of different verticals. We are becoming part of Capgemini, and we're very excited about that, and that integration has been going incredibly well. So we'll be part of that family. Well, we already are, but we will we'll be totally immersed in part of that family by the first of the year, and looking forward to that, and looking forward to continuing to do more good work and progressing things like this.
And so you can find us at altron.com.
That's what I was going to mention. That's
Sorry.
why she's the VP, Mark.
Looking for
Now you know, okay?
Yeah, we're also there's also write-ups about what we did and things like that on the general call for code site. So that's an asset as well, and all the stuff is there.
Excellent. Ronnie, I'm going to give you the last word.
I think what's most exciting, again, is I just want to thank the IBM company and, to really take on this charter to enable creativity to channel in such a humbling and heartwarming way. I would encourage anybody who have an inkling of an idea, of any idea, to share it and engage with a community that really help encourage you to, create wonderful answer. And whether those solutions become a real solution that people adopt or not, I think idea is what bring creativity and advancement to humanity. So thanks to IBM for allowing us to be part of this family, as well as Alan, thanks for giving us time to share our thought.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Ronnie, Mark, Daniel, great to see you all again and find out more as this continues to go. Next week is the award ceremony, as Daniel mentioned. Callforcode.org. You get all your information there on how to attend. You know what? It'll almost be time to start thinking about next year's Call for Code, right? At this point, we're in October. But that's it for now. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with our next guest.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and Media Ops CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
As part of my theme today for Just Tech, in spite of everything going on, remains a beacon and so busy and unprecedented demand. Our friends at PagerDuty is seeing that as well. Rachel Opsler, VP of Product at PagerDuty, joins us. They recently did a global study on usage burnout and other issues. Some of the results are, I think, right in line with what you expect. Some others are maybe surprising. But let's now join Rachel and see what she has to tell us. Rachel Opsletter from PagerDuty.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode here on TechStrong TV. Our guest for this episode is my friend Rachel Opsletter. Rachel, if I mispronounce your last name, I do my best, but we're going to have you say it right anyway. Rachel is, of course, with PagerDuty, and she's here today talking about a presentation, a session she's having over at Chaos Conference, put on by our friends at Gremlin. And the Chaos Conference was live on Thursday, October 8th. So if you probably are watching this, I'm going to guess maybe after October 8th. I do believe all their sessions are available on demand. So if you head over to ChaosCon or Chaos Conference, you'll be able to catch Rachel's presentation there. But anyway, Rachel, welcome.
Thank you, Alan. It's great to be here.
Great to have you. Rachel, say your right name. You're right. The right pronunciation of your last name.
It's
I mangled it.
Rachel Opsler. It's like all those consonants, just forget they're even there and just go right through them.
Opsler. I think that's the way I actually said it, but okay.
That makes me too.
Yeah, no, sometimes muscle memory kicks in. But anyway, Rachel, it's a pleasure to have you back on. As I mentioned, you are, of course, with PagerDuty, but why don't you give us your title and kind of duties at PagerDuty?
Sure. I'm the Vice President of Product Management, so I run the product management team, figure out what we should be building, work closely with the engineering team.
Excellent. And so, Rachel, you had a really good session for this Chaos Conference. Why don't you we'll start off with sharing the title with our audience.
Yeah, the title is 5 easier things you can do to reduce operational load. And so kind of where we started or why I thought it was important to talk about that is because I don't know if you probably do remember back in May we spoke about how with COVID, we were just seeing this crazy increase in number of incidents, both across our platform, PagerDuty, and also just really hitting certain verticals very hard. And so, given that incidents do happen, thought it was important to talk about how you can reduce the load associated with them.
Absolutely. Rachel, before we jump into the kind of nuts and bolts of your talk, there's a lot of people out here listening, watching. And I've heard this from people. When you're putting on a virtual conference and you go out and say, Rachel, we'd like you to present at our conference, right? And you say, okay, what do you want me to present about? What are you looking for? How much of this was kind of your idea and your feeling versus how much of it is, the folks behind Chaos Conference saying, we'd like you to talk about this subject. And then you can get your title or whatever, but this is the subject.
Yeah, so in my experience, most of the time, beyond like a very high level guidance or maybe a track, like here's the theme of the track, typically they leave it up to you. And so this is actually good because I find it hard to talk about things I don't feel strongly about. And so I like, being able to think about what is meaningful, what do I think will be meaningful to the audience, and also what is meaningful to me.
Great. All right, let's jump in. So talk to us about your session.
So as I mentioned, it's 5 things. It's always good to have a snappy title. So 5 things that you can do to reduce operational load. And, the premise of it is that first of all, it's a Chaos Conference. And so most of the people going to the Chaos Conference presumably believe in the ideas of and the principles of DevOps, which is that you would hope. Yep, have developers who own and operate their services. They care about making them resilient. That's why you do chaos engineering, to help make them more resilient and performant. And the idea that when something goes wrong, that you figure out what is the root cause and you fix it at the root. So you prevent incidents from happening again. You have a postmortem process and you go through all that. And so while that is best practice, what we see is that even though that's best practice and you do that as much as you can, sometimes things are really hard to fix. So sometimes you may have, a lot of companies, PagerDuty included, have a monolith. Right? We've been around for 10 years. And so there is some code that was created 10 years ago. Maybe very hard to pull apart pieces and redo things. And maybe you're doing it slowly over time. Sometimes it's just a really knotty problem and it can take a long time to invest in to fix it, which means you end up getting repeat incidents until you fix that problem. And then the other thing is, most of us are changing our code all the time. You want to constantly put out new features, new capabilities, grow your business. And so every time you put out a change, there's a risk that you're going to have a problem. It's the unknown. And so the fact is that incidents do happen. And we've certainly seen, as we talked about 5 months ago, that incidents have increased quite a bit. So we've actually seen, if we just look at the 6 months after COVID compared to the 6 months before COVID, that incidents in the PagerDuty platform across our customer base have increased 38%. That's pretty significant amount of additional load that teams have to deal with.
So what do you attribute that to?
A lot of it is that there were about, I think Satya Nadella said this, 2 years of digital transformation happened in 2 months.
But yeah.
So we all suddenly had to go work from home. So, everyone now is using more digital services than they ever were before. And so not only are people working from home and using digital to do that, but everyone is buying things online, and people are going to stores less. People are ordering food online. There was a huge increase in surge in amount of usage of streaming platforms collaboration platforms, e-learning platforms. And so that put a lot of stress on the teams that are managing those digital services.
Agreed. So it really is just, it's volume. It's really what it comes down to. It's seeing more volume, of people using these digital services,
which is, as you said, pretty much stress on it. So Rachel, unfortunately, as I mentioned at the outset, most people are going to be watching this after it was live, and they can still watch it on demand. What do you, I mean, beyond the 5 things that people need to do, right? What do you want people to really get out of this, bigger lessons beyond those, 5 specifics?
So a couple of things. I'd say the first one is really just a recognition that the teams are under stress and what that can do. So, we actually also ran a survey, and I can read off some numbers from it, but we saw, for instance, 62% of people, there were about 700 respondents around the world in dev and IT, so 62% spend 10 plus extra hours a week resolving incidents since COVID started. That's a lot of time, right? Assuming you work a 40 or 50-hour week, it's a big percentage. 55% are asked to resolve incidents more than 5 times a week in personal time. So not during the regular work hours, but after work hours. So these are people who are going on call and have to do work after hours. 40% expect this to get worse in the next 6 to 12 months, which is interesting. You think eventually things will go back to normal, but I think as many people have said, the shift is probably here to stay, this move to digital. And probably even this move to working from home. I expect we're going to see a lot more people continuing to work from home over time.
Oh, absolutely. I've seen numbers there, Rachel, that probably 40 to 60% of us will work from home a majority of our time. But here's an interesting, and because we obviously I speak to a lot of people coming through here, right? When we talk about those kinds of numbers and we say people like us and those like us, damn few left, right? We forget for a second that if you're in the knowledge business, IT, right? Services, yes, that's absolutely true. You can do your work from home and you can very well continue to do your work from home. But we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that if you're not in the knowledge or that kind of business, you can't. It's not such an easy thing to say. Oh, I'll just work from home, right? A lot of people can't, and a lot of those people are really, really hurting, right, during these times. So when we say, oh, it's not going to change for the next 6 to 12 months, you've got people saying, oh my God, how am I going to pay my rent for the next or my mortgage or my whatever for the next 6 to 12 months? So though it's more work for us, for many of us, thankfully we can do it from home, right? Versus those who can't. But there's a flip side to this, Rachel, and that is, yes, we did 2 years and 2 months, 6 years and 6 months. And I don't think we'll ever go back because time only goes in one direction, right? But is it sustainable? At some point, can you continue doing 62% more incidents or something like that?
Yeah.
Can you continue doing 62% more than you were doing before without burning out, without the whole thing crashing, without, massive infusions of new man hours, women hours, people hours, right? Because if not, you got to ask yourself, why were we running so fat that you were able to do, 62% less last year, and you were wiping your head saying, oh my God, I'm working so hard. And here you are this year doing 62% more. It can't be sustainable, in my mind anyway. It can't be sustainable.
Well, that's exactly right. And so that gets to the great other takeaway point, which is, most of the tips or all the tips really have to do with automation. And, when I say automation, it's a pretty broad term. It can mean a lot of different things. I am thinking about it very broadly. It's really any sort of reducing manual tasks that you need to do, or making it much easier to do things. Anything like that can be considered automation. And so, as simple as making sure that when you have an incident, you have a really easy automated way to communicate to all your stakeholders, right? That's automation. That's better than having to create an email list by hand and sending out messages without templates that could have the wrong information. You can actually automate lots of things that may seem like it doesn't save a lot of time, but when you're doing these things over and over, and when you're off hours and when you're trying to get things done in the middle of the night, it is really important to actually cut down on that manual work, and then also allow people to focus on fixing the problem instead of this extraneous stuff that you can automate.
Yeah. So I forgot where it was. I was reading an article a day or so ago about, what do we really mean when we say automation kind of thing? Because a lot of people have, ask 10 people, you get 10, 11 different, stories around what do we mean by automation. And just because we can automate, should we automate? And so I think the gold rush to transform is on and well underway. But I think one of this next phase, if you will, is we're going to learn to maybe get smart about automation, right? So we're not just going to automate because we can, or we're not going to automate everything we can. Or maybe we will initially, and we are now, but we need to get smart about automation
over the next 6-12 months.
I agree. And, a lot of people, when you say automation, they think of auto remediation. And that is important. That's something to look at. There's a lot of ways to automate that don't have to go that it doesn't necessarily need to be auto remediation. It could be, as I said, automation of communication. It could be automation of pulling people together into the right collaboration channel. There's a lot of different ways to automate in an incident process, or reducing noise, automation of grouping like things together so you don't have to wade through tons of different incidents. Like, there's a lot of things you can do. But to your point, being smart about automation or auto remediation, there are ways to be smart about that. I've talked to a lot of customers who have very mixed feelings about auto remediation, because one is that you could run something, you could auto remediate it, and it could make it better, say 80% of the time, but maybe 5% of the time, 15% of the time it doesn't work, and 5% it makes something worse, right? And so auto remediation comes with its own issues, but I think there are very safe ways to implement auto remediation, and a good safe way to do it is to, to start by having it what's sometimes called like Iron Man mode. So the person actually kicks it off. So you have a person babysitting it, making sure it works. And once you're comfortable enough times that it works, then you can move to having the machine do it automatically with maybe a person as a backup. So that's one of the great things about PagerDuty, is that we're kind of the person backup. And so, using a tool like, using PagerDuty, that product, or you could, obviously use other tools, but, the ability to both kick off automation and also have a person as a backup if it doesn't work is really key.
Agreed. So, Rachel, I got a bigger question around, this isn't the first virtual event you're speaking at, right? We are in October. I forgot, my team had done a dig of how many DevOps events there are, or DevOps related events, virtual, there are this October. And the number was like boggling. It might have been 24 DevOps related events alone in October. How do you now as Rachel, how do you decide that's a good event, I maybe want to speak out, or if that's a good event, I really want to attend and catch some of the sessions, right? How, what makes a good virtual event in your mind?
That's a really great question. As you said, there are a lot of events. We actually just held PagerDuty Summit a few weeks ago. And so one thing I would say about virtual events is that the nice thing about them is that they are available afterwards. And so I have usually a schedule that is back to back every minute of the day. So I actually don't have a lot of time to take 2 days or half a day even and attend a full event. But what I like is when the events are available after the fact. And so you can actually just choose to see, individual sessions that you find interesting and watch them anytime. So I have to admit, from my point of view, I actually don't think of it as attending an event anymore. I think of it as, watching the sessions that are really relevant and interesting to you.
Agreed. So look, we do events here as part of what we do, right? We put on our own, media ops produced events and initially my view of these events was, because they're not webinars. We do a lot of webinars, but these were not webinars. So my view of them were very much a 3D physical event in a 2D virtual environment, right? So we have the expo hall with a picture of a booth, and you go on that booth and you click the screen and things happen, right? Or there's a chat. You go into the auditorium to listen to the speaker sessions and so forth, and you click the screen. But now I've come to realize that that's just my own, view of, I'm going to an event, and this is what an event is in my mind. An event is I walk into the lobby, I get a registration badge, and I look at my program, I say, oh, Rachel's speaking in room 505. And I run over to 505 to catch Rachel's talk. And then I'm going to walk the show floor a little bit, or I'm going to go, to the bar and have some chat and something. And so I think initially a lot of virtual events tried to recreate that paradigm. But like you said, who the hell has time to sit down on 24 live DevOps events this month? I got a job to do. So it's nice to be able to watch them on demand when I want. Maybe I do lose going to the exhibitors or the live chat, which is pretty cool, especially some of the ones that are doing video chats and stuff. But at the end of the day, the sessions are probably the meat and potatoes of it for us. And as long as I can watch them when I want, that's okay too.
Yeah, I mean, what I really hope is that when we return, hopefully, to normalcy at some point, that there is a really nice mix of in-person and online events, because I do think they serve different purposes. The in-person events are great because you can have that personal relationship. Like, I like the buzz of them. I like meeting with customers face to face. I like being at the booth when I don't have meetings. I like just being there and seeing who comes by and talking to them and having these, just random conversations and seeing what people are thinking. So I miss that a lot, and I missed that a lot when we held our summit. But at the same time, I also think that the online events give you a much better ability to reach more people because they don't have to be there in person. And so what I see in the future is like a great mix of those two things working together and solving different problems.
That's exactly what we're planning for, not immediately after the new year, but by next spring, summer. So we're going to start kind of trying to produce hybrid events, because I don't think we're going to see 50,000 people rushing back to the Moscone Center, right? I at this point, if I saw 50,000 people, I don't know how I would react. I may go into a deep psychosis, but I think we'll have a couple of thousand people, and then many thousands more joining in online, and the online aspect of it will try to capture that in person, but it won't, because, like you said, you won't have those random interactions. You won't have that face-to-face. But it'll offer other things that you can't do in person. And so, we're developing our next-gen virtual events for next year. as hybrid events right now. God willing, we'll see how that goes, but it's all good. Rachel, we're almost out of time. What's new at PagerDuty?
Well, actually, we just had a big release because we had our summit event. So we announced a lot of new capabilities. One that I'm really excited about is it actually matches this idea of automating things. So, a lot of times you get a lot of incidents that are related to the same problem, or you could have a lot of incidents that are not really incidents, like it triggers and then it auto resolves within a couple minutes. And it could be because there is auto remediation. It could be because it was just a very touchy monitor. And so it wasn't a real problem. And so we've come out with noise reduction recommendations. So a capability for us to just look at your service, to look at all the incidents that have happened over time and say, hey, if you turned on this setting in this way, and you can do it by just clicking this button, this is how many incidents you would not have gotten. So just reducing the noise out of your system. And we'll actually show you all the ones we would have reduced so that you can get comfortable that we're not getting rid of anything that's important. Because we know that developers need to see to believe, which is great. So I'm very excited about that because it literally, with the click of the button, helps you reduce noise in your system, which saves time. You don't have to be interrupted by those incidents anymore.
Fantastic. That sounds great. Good stuff. Rachel, in the beginning of our talk, you said, the last time I was here back in May, and I didn't, I kept my poker face on. But was it really May? I felt like I spoke to you a month or so ago.
I thought it was May. I could be wrong.
Time flies when you're trying to duck COVID, so who knows? But don't stay away that long again if it was. That's like 4 months ago. So come back and visit us before then.
I will for sure.
All righty. Rachel Opsler from PagerDuty, VP Product Management there, presenter at ChaosConf, brought on by the folks at Gremlin. Thanks for being on TechStrong TV with us again, Rachel. Take care of yourself.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Alan. Great to be here.
All righty. This is Alan Schimmel, TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with our next guest.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, good stuff there from Rachel. Well, next up, we have a regular feature. It is our Cyber Hero Adventure Show, hosted, co-produced by the one and only Gary Berman. Gary has some interesting guests today, Mario Volkson from Reversing Labs and Mark Orsi from Global Resilience Federation. If you've never seen Cyber Hero Adventures show before, buckle up. It's a fun ride. Let's now go to Gary Berman at Cyber Hero Adventures.
Hello, and welcome to the Cyber Hero Adventures Defenders of the Digital Universe show. Today's show focuses on answering the question, how do we protect and defend the nation's critical infrastructure from nation states and criminals? Stay tuned to find out more. I'm your host, Gary Berman. Our mission is to shine a light on the people and organizations who keep us safe online while at work, home, at school, and to serve as a business-to-business networking platform for the cybersecurity and IT communities. We've learned that 55% of human communications is nonverbal, and that's why we include a video feed so that you have the option of seeing our guests or simply to just listen. You never know who you're going to connect with and how you'll be able to maximize opportunities resulting from the hearing from our guests. As the victim of a series of cyber attacks, I've learned that the only time that you hear about hacking or cybersecurity is when the criminals win. Well, not anymore. Let's begin by saying thank you to today's panel of unsung cyber heroes who represent the countless people who toil in anonymity to keep us safe at home, work, and school. Let's welcome Mario Buxan, the CEO and co-founder of Reversing Labs. He serves as CEO, driving all aspects of the company's strategy, operations, and implementation. Mario has held senior technical positions at Bit9, now Carbon Black, Microsoft, Groove Networks, and PictureTel, now Polycom. He's the author of numerous research studies, speaking regularly at FSISAC, RSA, Black Hat, and other leading security conferences. Hey, Mario. Welcome to the show.
How are you? How are you?
Great. It's so nice to see you again.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Our next guest is Mark Orsi, the president of the Global Resilience Federation, a nonprofit with the mission to develop and support threat intelligence and information sharing communities, including financial, retail, professional services, energy, transportation, health, and operational technology. Mr. Orsi led strategic efforts for several prominent Fortune 100 companies, working directly with CIOs and CISOs to develop, deploy, and improve security controls, protecting the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of sensitive information. Hey, Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, Gary, thanks. Thanks for the invite.
Our pleasure. Mark, we're going to learn a lot about what you do on today's shows, but I'd like to begin by asking, why do you do it? What is your mission? Tell us your origin story.
Sure. Thanks, Gary. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks to Mario for being part of the panel. So not to date myself, but I got out of college with an aerospace engineering degree at an inopportune time for me, but a great time for the country. The Cold War had just ended. And I've had quite a random walk in my career. In my time working as an engineer, I built and tested experimental aircraft. I worked with NASA and the space shuttle to attach a booster to a satellite to get it back in the right orbit. And I worked to develop expert systems that managed large constellations of telecommunications satellites. Interestingly, this was my first introduction to industrial control systems, as the same expert systems that I was using were also used for process control for things like paper mills. In the early 2000s, I helped build a services company which was focused on network management and operational support systems for the telecom industry. I dabbled in enterprise search for a few years, but ultimately I made it to the financial services industry, working for Goldman Sachs to protect data and help the organization manage emerging threats. So this is where I really caught the security bug, and I started learning about the power of information sharing, working with FSISAC and other organizations in the financial sector to combat the rising tide of threat actors and their capabilities. Then I moved to KPMG, where I helped many different types of organizations, including industrial manufacturers, to set up entire cybersecurity programs. And then finally, I led efforts at JP Morgan to protect information before ultimately joining the Global Resilience Federation last year. And in GRF, as you mentioned, I found a great home. We are a nonprofit. We're a member-driven organization where we're passionate in helping establish and develop information sharing communities for critical infrastructure and other sectors. Information sharing is a foundational element of all cybersecurity programs, and we encourage businesses of all sizes to become members of their industry ISAC or ISAO. Because if your company, your vendors, your supply chain, if we're all joined together in collective defense, you can better detect and reduce the impact of emerging threats on your enterprise and the industry. So thanks again, Gary, for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and thanks for your service. You're an example of the unsung cyber heroes that our mission is dedicated to, so thanks so much for what you do. As it relates to industrial control systems, you and I were talking about, you just had a conference, dealing with industrial control systems and things like that. Can you share with our audience a little bit about that mission?
Sure. So we formed late last year an organization called OTISAC, so Operational Technology Information Sharing and Analysis Center. So we worked with the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore to establish it. So it is in Singapore today, and essentially has a global mission, though, to help operational technology organizations, critical infrastructure organizations, work together for collective defense against emerging threats. So information sharing analysis centers, we act as a hub where we have analysts that collect threat intelligence from multiple sources, but also from our members. So if one member has an event, either they detect a threat or they have an incident, they can report it into this organization, OTISAC, and then we can help spread that message to the community and help people defend themselves from that attack. We've seen this time and time again where this model has really worked through, I mentioned, FSI sector, financial services sector, and we're taking that model and applying it to all these different sectors.
And it really begins to answer a question that I've had since I've entered, this kind of Forrest Gump journey into cybersecurity several years ago. And that is, the criminals, the black hats, are kind of, horizontally structured. They share information freely. There's the equivalent of a Yelp, rating system on how services were provided. And the defenders, at least to me, seem very vertically oriented, and the ISAC to work with that. Is that a valid, kind of premise?
Yeah, so they are working together, right? And they're in some ways loosely, in some ways very organized. And so for us to be able to address the ever-changing threats and those emerging threats, those things that are brand new, we need to be more dynamic in our approach. And we need to have this collective defense mechanism where essentially we're increasing the attack surface area. So if you're a member of an OTISAC community, you're one of many organizations that might detect an attack. So you've effectively increased your attack surface area without really increasing your risk. And then you're able to better defend against those problems as quick as they come.
Indeed. Mario, please share with our audience, your origin story and the mission. Why do you do what you do?
Well, at Traversing Labs and sort of, me and my co-founder personally, we're very much, dedicated to, delivering the transparency and accountability to computer science. Sort of, for all of us who sort of, again, have seen the Cold War and other stuff, Mark, as you mentioned, we all know sort of, early days of, computer science programs, sort of, learn programming on your own time, learn a lot of math, and, let's, start working on the compilers. Computer engineering somewhere else, that's really kind of engineering thing, let's not get bothered by how hardware operates, and let's really not try to truly understand how one could, understand the unknown code that could be found anywhere else. So, name of the company is Traversing Labs because, we are really dedicated to really understanding what happens in the other direction, meaning, when you don't know who has built something, how do we figure out what was the intent of the code, how did it look like, and what's potentially inside of it. Now, in this, we came to the realization that, world in its sort of, early decades, of internet was very much focused on, text, on the HTML, JavaScript at the most. And, was not really focusing on, what is, more than 50%, of internet today. And those are the binary payloads. Executable apps, sort of, the containers, VMs, Windows, Linux, Mac, mobile applications, all the way to documents that are these days encoded, custom apps, transactions. There's all kinds of encryption. There's all sorts of ways, where you could hide both executable content as well as, personal data, exfiltrated content, etc. And as we sort of try to figure out, how to make sense out of it, we've realized there's a tremendous amount of complexity on it. And effectively, once you get in the binary world, you're like sort of, tens and tens of PhDs into sort of, understanding the indirection, of the computer science, understanding what, humans and machines could create and, miscreate, in some point. And, when you talk about documentation, specifications, parsing, and anticipating the future, it's very, very difficult. And so when you mention ICS, one of the biggest problems, for ICS is that, these devices were built many, many years ago where no one was really anticipating that, all of these devices will be connected and there will be a rogue criminal, or a government player on the other side attempting to truly destroy the infrastructure and everything that, we rely on there. This sort of, the predicament, was there for us, from the smallest things, from, inability to test, troubleshoot, inability to extract the firmware and the components, inability to easily manage things. Of course, we are now a lot smarter in the last, several years. I mean, we have, of course, ICS CERT and similar organizations dedicated, to ICS knowledge. We have now even startups, focusing on, firmware vulnerabilities and understanding. And so things will get better, but, we are very much in an early stage. Now, from our perspective, just sort of, go back to kind of, why I'm super interested about this topic is that, as we started, analyzing your typical sort of binary objects or things running on Windows, Linux, Mac OS, we clearly realized that potential for malfeasance is available in all kinds of areas. You could send all sorts of crazy things, through financial transactions, through healthcare documents, just documents and an email, malforming the emails, GIS documents, configurations, open source libraries, all sorts of areas that normally we do not think as a great and then potential vectors for attacks. And these are the areas that are of super high interest to those attackers that have the means and motivations to make a lot of damage. And this is unfortunately where ICS is sort of the most exciting target to be had.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark, just to build on what Mario just said, what was in your view, the motivation for the DHS to create the initial 16 critical infrastructure sectors? What were they thinking? What was their mission?
Yeah, so there are 16 critical infrastructure sectors that are considered vital to the United States, so that if they were incapacitated or destroyed, it would have a debilitating effect on security, on the national economic security or national public health or safety. So these 16 different infrastructure or sectors we all need to think about their security, their supply chain risk, all the things that we need to do to protect them, because ultimately they'll impact our national economic security. So we're part of the National Council of ISACs, where information sharing communities actually work together to develop best practices, to do better at detection, at security best practices for all of the critical infrastructure sectors.
So Mario, given these various sectors, which sector of the economies would you say are the most vulnerable to nation state and criminal attacks regarding industrial control systems, and why do you think that?
I mean, there are 16 critical systems because they're all critical, which is unfortunately like,
Right.
Still come back, to you on that. I mean, just think of it, if you were to lose the critical players, in all of these segments, there will be significant effect, on our, day-to-day life, and we don't have to go as far as like, the energy not having, or water, not having sort of, the basic, parts, of our day-to-day life. So, I mean, the financial systems not operating will be obviously hugely critical in attacking transportation. I mean, we can go one by one, and then truly affecting it. So it's more like the question, where do we feel, there's least visibility, and that's kind of area where we really need to go back to what does ICS means to us. And, how do we isolate, and move forward, a lot of those devices that unfortunately have 20, 30, 40 years, lifespan, and, software running on them is, very, very aged, and if attacker gets to it, really, really horrific things could happen with very difficult scenarios, for getting us back, to the.
Yeah, and just adding to that, I think there are each of the different critical infrastructure sectors have differences and some commonalities. If you think about the financial services sector, they are critical infrastructure sector, but they're not not an industrial control system type thing. So they are less likely to have these outdated operating systems. But there's a lot of commonalities to the way that they can work together with other financial services organizations, share information, and protect themselves from advanced attacks. And to play on Mario's point, on all the other industrial sectors, and I think water, energy, transportation, those are really key ones. A lot of them do depend upon these really old, outdated operating systems that they've just segmented networks for. And now we have this new convergence where we're getting those systems connected to IT systems, and they're connected in ways that you wouldn't expect, and suddenly they're vulnerable to these types of attacks.
And given now, Mario, the convergence of work and home at school, inside homes, do you see this as significantly increasing the attack surface, pertaining to ICS?
Well, I mean, definitely COVID and sort of, push to, work, from home has changed the surface area tremendously. So organizations spend so much time and effort and money on protecting their corporate networks, now already struggling how to protect, home networks of, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of employees with all sorts of, new gear, especially consumer grade, devices. So think of it like, baby ICS, not really, I mean, they're not ICS, but like, more like the IoT type of devices, that could be used, for, stealing data, amplifying denial of service attacks and doing all sorts of other nefarious activities. That becomes a problem. But also, the COVID has, increased, the needs, to change the architecture and move a lot of stuff, to the cloud. So new ways of, protecting things, new ways of connecting, that ICS, hardware, where and how it is necessary. So that, a lot of the vectors are rather new, and a lot of the techniques for protection have yet to be, fully honed, which sort of, opens up a new vector for, a lot of the attackers. I mean, for example, so if you're managing a lot of the ICS stuff, probably now, you have to, well, in organizations that allow that, I'm sure there's still sort of, very much, old school organizations where without physical presence, at the site, nothing really happens. But as organizations need to start, loosening, some regulations. You allow for, VPN connections. You allow potentially access from, not so trusted, endpoints, directly to the bowels, of a system. And this is sort of, where we see a lot of, focus on all this sort of, COVID-related themes, all this sort of, semi-business phishing campaigns that generally happen on the weekends when you are, working on your employer issued, laptop, from home, and, could easily jump, through, through the VPN connection, or even better, through one of these, the enterprise apps that have access to the systems at the other end. And those systems, of course, could be managing, different parts of the ICS infrastructure.
Indeed. And Mark, what are you seeing, about this convergence at home across the, let's say, the various ISACs? How's all that going?
Yeah, no, I think we have a few really key things that we need to address. We talked about unpatched systems. I think the poorly authenticated remote access, unencrypted passwords in these systems, which, in these legacy systems, a lot of times you just had your passwords out and available and shared. This increased interconnectivity and direct internet connections where suddenly these devices are online. And then I think a really big thing that's been lacking too is a lack of monitoring for the operational technology systems to look for anomalous activities. So I was talking, I was on a panel about a week ago with Jeff Campbell, who was the CISO of Horizon Power, a company that supplies power to the largest low population density area in the world in Western Australia. So imagine these devices are few, far, and wide. And so even if you have great access control, your physical systems are spread over a huge geographic area. So you're vulnerable to an entirely different set of attacks. But the interesting thing about, about this new remote access capability, and with him, it's largely remote access. But he stressed the foundational IT and cybersecurity methods like the simple asset management, change control, access controls that you should develop in these systems, and then building joint OT, IT, and cyber teams that work together to comprehensively address security and safety. So there's a big difference between the hat that an OT systems engineer wears, where he's really considering safety as the primary, his primary importance, and then you have cybersecurity teams, confidentiality, integrity, availability, and they don't speak the same language. So making them work together to address these emerging threats is really important. Getting them to speak the same language and understand that cybersecurity impacts safety.
And to that end, to speak the same language, I'm going to ask both of you now, and then just say the answer out loud at the same time. So on a scale of 1 to 100, how would you rate the current state of industrial control systems regarding cybersecurity? So I'll say 1, 2, 3, and just call out a number. There's no right or wrong answer. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
10.
60.
10 and 60. That's interesting.
It depends, right? I wouldn't rate it specifically. Like, the threat landscape is constantly changing. Interconnectivity is changing. Organizations are actively working to address their threats. It's a moving target, and small companies, I think, would have be on the 10 side, and I think some of the larger companies that are really working and working with more modern systems, where they have security by design built into them, or maybe the newer ones maybe would be higher on that scale. So I don't think 10 is wrong. I think that there's probably different aspects to it.
Yeah,
just like everywhere else, you're looking for the explanation, the grade. Just like when you're reviewing the movies, like, why is that? Then, like, give me explanation. So that is obviously the story. I mean, and I'm here looking really sort of, from the, from sort of the, transparency, accountability perspective, understanding how we can manage the systems. Unfortunately, because a lot of the older systems, were all custom made. From custom OSs, custom applications, custom protocols that are, not well documented. Maybe even developers are no longer alive, that, actually built, some of these things, This, I think, increases in a tremendous amount, the amount of risk, that, operators need to take. I'm not saying that, this really means that, like, this is, going to get, owned and, knocked down tomorrow. I mean, there's all kinds of really stringent, procedures for many years, that, separated, networks. People have sort of, not cut corners, but, like, modernized certain aspects, over the last few years, but still a lot of stuff is really in that pristine, state, where, we are using the compilers that don't have the modern vulnerability protections built into them. We're using the software stack, whether internally or, God forbid, even sort of, externally built, that, has not been updated for many, many, many years, including, all kinds of vulnerabilities with it. Certainly has not been audited for a lot of the modern practices, especially around, hiding secrets, passwords, or kind of closing what we now view as, the critical, the backdoors into a system. A lot of that stuff, I would recommend, to increase really the, in my view, the score needs to be addressed by, let's not call it regulation, but, like, the frameworks, and the work of different, standards bodies, that, would, push the vendors, to certify the quality of the code going into one of these devices to be at much higher level than, Mic 10.
Well, just to build on that, Mark, what are your thoughts about the Department of Defense, cybersecurity maturity model certification, CMMC? I recently had the opportunity to do a presentation to the federal government over at MITRE, on this topic. And, what do you think about the CMMC pertaining to the security of the supply chain?
So I think it's a really important initiative, and we have an upcoming conference in November, November 5th, around third-party risk, and really getting a handle on your supply chain and third-party risk is critical for your organization and for critical infrastructure organizations. When I was working for banks, we were worried about legal services and professional services firms where they had access to our most sensitive information, but maybe didn't have the same level of cyber controls. And so one of the things that we're doing at GRF is working to develop communities that raise the level of cyber maturity for legal and professional services firms and create communities for their collective defense. Every firm has a set of vendors and a supply chain that they need to be aware of for critical infrastructure. As we've learned in the COVID-19 era, we need to make sure that we have a robust supply chain with redundancies to reduce risk, and we need to be aware of the third, the fourth party risk. And further, when it comes to critical components, you can easily imagine a scenario where you have multiple suppliers of a critical component, which makes you feel comfortable, but they all rely upon a common source for key materials. So until you do that thorough and deep analysis of your supply chain, you haven't fully identified risks to your operations. Back to CMMC, that's just one way that they're working to bring just the base level maturity of all their suppliers, cyber maturity up a notch, right? For them to be aware of cybersecurity, for them to think about it and what they do, and to reach that baseline level of security that you need all your suppliers to be.
Absolutely. And Mario, let me ask you, in your view, as we're wrapping up here, what are the best practices to ensure the security of industrial control systems? And why do you think that?
As we know, I mean, it's tinkering with ICS systems is probably not, the most, forgiving, of, experiments, So, a lot of systems really need to be kind of monitored from outside, and, a lot of things, is really focusing on the people, just to sort of, controls, connections, isolation, of these networks. And I think that's something we're probably going to have to deal with it. We're really not going to be patching it in most, cases. What we really need to focus is, on the future. And that's why I'm really, really excited about a lot of this different, federal initiatives, around, setting up frameworks, procedures, and the policies, surrounding the supply chain. And I'm really very excited that, we're finally talking about software supply chain. Because before, for a lot of these things, we were really talking about the chips, the hardware, but no one was really seeing, the world of problems that, happens once you extract the code that's running on those chips, and the hardware. Much of that code, written many years ago or utilizing way outdated, open source, libraries. So I think, as we develop, the risk models, scores, and, start applying them as gating factors. After all, think of it, any buyer should be able to say, this particular device is cheap because the software running on it, was written in 3-5 days by somebody who does not know how to write code, versus that's 10 times more expensive. But, they have all this elaborate, software testing and review processes. And, when it comes to the risk, and the longevity, I mean, that's definitely something that we as a nation, ought to demand, to have.
That's an incredibly important insight. Thank you for that. And Mark, as we're wrapping up, is there anything else that you'd like to add to amplify your mission?
Yeah, well, a couple things. I mean, first, I'd like to just, talk about the, Reversing Labs, your work as well. And one of the things that I talked to somebody just the other day, and they're one of probably 25 people that know a specific protocol for a specific system, industrial control systems. and like you said, these are legacy protocols that maybe haven't been used in many years, or are used in for very specific purposes. And he had found that there were threat actors that had sort of reverse engineered that protocol, which was kind of scary, because he's one of the few people that understands it, and suddenly these threat actors that are for unknown reasons starting to parse and understand that stuff. So they're active, right, and they're working hard and trying to figure out ways to find something new and use it for malicious activities. I think understanding what those actors are doing, and patching your systems, right, making sure that you have authentication, access controls, and controlling your internet connections, and then monitoring your systems is really important. For us, I think, as I mentioned at the very beginning, it's every business should be part of an information sharing community. So whether it's an official ISAC or ISAL, or there's sort of different levels of information sharing where at the highest level, your CISOs are meeting quarterly with other CISOs to just understand what is the emerging threat environment, what are the controls we're implementing, how can we make improvements, and doing that with members of your community is really important. Then you also have the sort of lowest level where you have indicators of compromise that are being shared, and machine-to-machine type things where your firewalls are automatically getting updated. That's critically important. And that middle layer where you have operational day-to-day activities where your security teams, your IT teams are looking at and addressing those emerging threats in an operational basis, that's critically important. So being part of those communities really helps you do that day-to-day activity that's important.
Thank you for that. And Mario, is there anything else that you'd like to add to amplify your mission?
Well, so, as far as our mission is concerned, we are very much, interested in sort of tracking and monitoring threats across many of these different, surface areas, knowing that there is a replication from one area to another. After all, sooner or later, you're going to realize that, everything is being built, of, ones and zeros, and the code does, travel, whether it's, the OT or IT network in one way or another. And so having tremendous amount of, understanding, analysis, and intelligence, in an area that may be orthogonal to what you're doing could be extremely useful in, dividing, the real, from potential from actually false, alerts that the network could have.
Well, thank you for that. And final question, Mark. As I was going through this improbable forest gump journey into cybersecurity, I was looking for some kind of a North Star, and I found it in the form of Albert Einstein, who, when a reporter asked him, he said, "Mr. Einstein, on one hand, you have science and physics and mathematics, and on the other hand, you have the possible existence of a higher authority or God." And he famously replied, "Coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous." So I want to ask you, can you share with our audience sort of an Einstein moment of any type that you can recall?
Oh, so like
that's a trick question.
Trick question, from a very trick mind.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Anyway,
by the way, I'll do Mario. By the way, I'll do comedy, and then you do cybersecurity.
That sounds very good. Let's do that.
I'll give you an alternative. Do you have a favorite superhero?
I think we talked, we mentioned this before. If you know who is Alan Ford, it's an Italian, the comic superhero. You should probably check it out. Sort of the anti-superhero, from the collection of anti-superheroes. Those would be sort of, something that I would find funny and comic.
Okay, and what I'm going to do now is pause for a couple of seconds in case we want to edit out this question. You'll be the first person that I asked. Given that, I'll wait. Given that we are in the era of Zoom, I think people forgot that human beings have torsos. They have a lower half. So what are you wearing?
I have shorts on.
Good. We don't want to see it. For more information, we'll include our guest's contact information in the show notes. And thanks so much to Mario Mark for this incredible show. If you would like to be a guest on our show, please send an email to Gary@cyberherocomics.com. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Mario.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hope you enjoyed Gary's show. We have one a week on here, and he's always looking for new guests and sponsors as well. If you're interested, go to the website for that one. Next up, though, maybe a little different take on cybersecurity, and that's our CISO Talk series. And it's myself and my co-host, Matt Newfield, CISO at Unisys, and we're joined, as usual, by Mitchell Ashley of Accelerated Strategies Group, and in this episode, Miranda Ritchie of IBM. And we're going to talk about cybersecurity issues in healthcare in a COVID world. And God knows there's enough of them. So here now is this episode of CISO Talk. Hey everyone, I'm Alan Schimmel and welcome to another episode of CISO Talk. I am joined by my co-host, Matt Newfield. Matthew is the CISO over at Unisys, and Matt, welcome.
Pleasure to be here. It's good to talk to you again.
And Matt and I are joined by our usual sidekick playing Ed McMahon this week, Mitch Ashley.
And introduce you.
Doing his best, yes. Mitch is, of course, CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group. And our guest for this episode is Miranda Ritchie of IBM. Miranda, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me. My name is Miranda Ritchie, and I'm a global delivery leader at IBM's Managed Security Services.
Excellent. And thank you. So, guys, the theme for this week's show is cybersecurity and healthcare. You know, and we were talking a little bit, you know, in the green room. Well, I'm in the green room, but we were talking a little bit before turning on the recording about, you know, the uniqueness of cybersecurity and healthcare, where we're not necessarily talking about financial gain or, you know, stealing money. We're not even really at this point talking about personally identifiable information and HIPAA information at this point. We're talking about the life and death nature that cyber threats can pose to individuals, you know, as a result of being, you know, within the healthcare industry. So with that as a backdrop, Matt, I'm going to ask you to kind of kick us off today and get us started.
Yeah, absolutely, Alan. You know, a few years ago, it was all the rage in the cybersecurity world to talk about how we had broached over or moved over from being in this virtual world to where the cybersecurity code, attack code, could actually impact physical things. And you can remember some stories about refinement machines being destroyed via bits and bytes. And that was That was a real eye-opener for a lot of people when it came to infrastructure and critical infrastructure at the time. Now we're starting to really see in the news a lot lately about how these cybersecurity attacks, these adversarial attacks, can impact much more than what we're used to reading about. We read about dollars, as you said. We read about our data, personally identifiable information, and we think it really stops there. Maybe it goes to reputation. Maybe it goes to me losing my checking account. But there's a lot of talk right now, and healthcare being the main area, about how it can impact life. And we've heard stories before, but this has been one of the real big ones. And whether or not you believe that this poor individual in Germany actually died because of the ransomware attack against the Dusseldorf University Clinic is almost irrelevant. It's opened the conversation up, and as we were discussing in the green room, it expands beyond to a much greater level of how is it we are going to, as a community of cybersecurity professionals, help to protect an infrastructure and help secure and lock down an infrastructure when you really look at that environment as something that has never really been locked down before and is run and utilized by a group of people where seconds do matter. Take away ransomware, seconds matter. And if you put too many gates in place, your cybersecurity could impact life. And it just opens up a very interesting conversation that I'm very excited to have with you, Alan, Miranda, and Mitch today.
Absolutely. So, Miranda, you as the new person here, we don't wait for us to call your name. Feel free to jump in and comment and take the conversation where you want it to go. But you're right, man. It's life and death, and for some of in our audience may not be familiar with the Dusseldorf case of this person who might have died. Does anybody want to just kind of give a quick brief on the fact pattern there? Does anybody know the fact pattern there?
I do. So
okay.
There was a 78-year-old woman who was experiencing cardiac arrest. She was picked up by an ambulance. The ambulance, through a ransomware attack in the hospital, was rerouted to a hospital that was much further away than the one she should have gone to. So when the ambulance crew arrived, they picked this poor woman up who was experiencing a significant medical emergency. And instead of going to the closest hospital, the system routed to a hospital further away, and it was blamed on a ransomware attack. And again, there is no evidence today, and if people comment, we're not here saying that caused her death. There's no evidence to say if they had cut 5-10 minutes off of that trip, she would have survived. But it opens that relevant point. Let's say there had been another medical emergency where 5 minutes would have mattered.
In medical emergencies, minutes and seconds count. And anything, whether it's cybersecurity related or any other related, if it's shaving minutes, costing you minutes and seconds, people's lives are at risk.
Right. And Miranda, you and I were talking a little while ago about, this an extension. We could go to that extreme of, what's going on in a hospital with ransomware and what's going on with the heart monitors. But you had a really interesting perspective and conversation around PPE. And that supply chain. I think that could be a really interesting conversation as well.
Yeah. So earlier this year, IBM reported on a campaign targeting a task force that was, the sole purpose was to supply, act as a supply chain for personal protective equipment. This was in Europe. And so, even though they're targeting, through phishing, they're targeting over 100 individuals at that task force, probably to steal information. It's not necessarily to encrypt their data. It's just part of the race for a vaccine, race for the cure, right? But as a byproduct of that or collateral damage of that, if you're restricting people's access to PPE in an already tight crunch situation where there's not enough to go around, you're still putting people's lives at risk if they're having to reuse old equipment.
I'm thinking too, Miranda, the whole supply chain integrity problem, right?
Right.
Is that kind of an attack, or is this truly valid PPE or whatever that is, drug that we're delivering, vaccine, or has it been compromised? Is it falsified? And you have to maintain that chain of control in your supply chain. And you lose that there could be lives at the other end that immediately are at stake.
Right. If the PPE is tainted or if testing equipment is faulty and it's returning a different false positive rate than it necessarily should be, that's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, I mean, you can even take that to an interesting extreme to say if let's say a bad actor was able to breach one of these suppliers, think of in healthcare again, the people who are making a vaccine and they beat them to market with a vaccine that may not work or may have implications later. You could go to an extreme to say there could be the human factor of I get really sick from the vaccine or the vaccine doesn't help me. But you said something a second ago that really stuck my head, which is that false positive. What if I think I'm cured? What if myself and my 1,000 closest friends think we're cured, and then we go to that stadium and infect other people? And you end up with potentially another strain of this virus.
Or super spreader event.
You end up with a super spreader event because, again, you're finding a cheaper alternative that sounds like it's the same thing when it's not. And
Black Sunday 2 or something like that would be another good movie. But guys, when I hear you talking about these things, in my mind, there's two camps. One camp is the ransomware attack, the supply chain attack that Miranda mentioned, and the cost to human healthcare, or the cost to humans who, as a result of healthcare, is almost collateral damage. I didn't ransomware the hospital because I meant that lady to die. Or I didn't do something to the supply chain because I wanted to cause that nurse not to have an N95 mask. I did it because I'm a scorpion and that's what I do, right? So I killed the frog halfway across the river. But then there's another type of attack altogether, and that is the on purpose, I'm trying to kill someone attack, right? And that is more kind of what when you talk about, we've seen, can we control someone's pacemaker? Can we hack into someone's pacemaker or insulin pump or something like that? And that now you're starting to get into, state-sponsored, not even espionage, but murder, assassination.
Yeah. Well, we do that through, Russia does that supposedly through poisons today. We hear about all the...
I don't think you have to say supposedly anymore. It's been pretty well documented.
Trying to be PC here a little bit.
Yeah, unless people apply neurotoxins to themselves, but whatever. But
you're talking about frogs and scorpions, so,
Yeah, well, I was trying to, what's the word there? An Aesop's
analog, right?
Yeah. But no, I mean, so I think as cybersecurity professionals, we have to worry about both of these scenarios, right? The inadvertent collateral damage of individuals' health care as a result of cyber activity, and then the on purpose downright murder of individuals using cyber methods, like terrorism. Can you imagine, and I don't even want to say it out loud, I'm afraid someone will get an idea, but a tainted virus, a tainted vaccine.
Tainted vaccine, yeah.
Right?
You could take it to the murder where, someone shuts that pacemaker off, someone, turns that MRI machine on when someone's in there doing work and the magnet turns on and rips the pacemaker out of your chest. But you could go that extreme. You could also think of ransomware in a new variant. Right now, ransomware is about give me dollars and cents or I'm going to steal or sell your data. The other variant I'm hearing from you, and Miranda, I don't know if you've seen this in the wild or hear any chatter on this, but I could also hold your hospital short-term ransom. You've got 20 minutes to pay Bitcoin or I will not turn your neonatal intensive care unit systems back on.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, and we're also seeing kind of an uptick in these blended ransomware attacks similar to Maze, right? Where they're not just encrypting your data, but they're taking it first and then playing a sort of name and shame game, right? Where they've got this wall of fame and they're going to publicly out you. I mean, imagine if that happened to a pharmaceutical company who did have, a cure or a vaccine. That's That's the keys to opening up the economy. There is a huge financial incentive for taking that data and exposing it publicly.
Yeah, absolutely. Or not exposing it and just trying to replicate it yourself, to Alan's point of nation state actors. And, this is really what scares people in this profession is, so, okay, what do you do? How do you convince doctors and nurses and practitioners in these environments whose entire lives have been focused on a singular mission, to save human life, a very noble mission. But when you add that securely to the end, that is a new realm. That's a new realm for some of the pharmaceutical companies. That is a new realm for hospitals and a lot of doctors and nurses. And, some of us may come across and go, come on, you got to do this stuff. You have to take cybersecurity seriously, but I get it. If you're a doctor and your sole focus is to go in and do brain surgery, or in the neonatal units to make sure those children live, how do we as cyber professionals broach that gap and that divide to say, but we want to make sure this potential thing that doctor probably has never experienced in their life, a ransomware attack, a virus, something that you read about but may not. How do you bridge that gap? And that, I think, Mitch, I don't know if you've thought through this, but in your experience, how do you bridge that gap?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that, because both Alan and I have experience security solutions into medical environments, into hospitals, and every environment has its own kind of unique personality. And I think maybe the personalities of doctors is kind of infamous of what it's like to work in that kind of environment. And I know exactly what you're talking about. It's that thing that gets in the way for me, not just doing my job, saving a life, taking care of this patient, my oath, right, to do no harm. So you're talking about a whole nother level of it. I wonder if there are places where we can replace things like tokens and passwords with something you wear, where proximity will enable you to use a piece of equipment and log on to something instead of fat fingering your password for the third time, or I forgot my card, right? But something that you can wear as part of your things that make the environment as you enter open up and give you the secure access. Those kind of approaches, rather than the typical things we think of in a corporate environment, like passwords and token cards and things like that.
I think to some extent, we also have to kind of go back to the basics and look at how these threat actors are doing what they do. And it's not sexy, it's not cool, but spam and phishing accounts for such a huge percentage of day-to-day attacks, including the one that I mentioned earlier about the attack on the PPE supply chain. When we talk about ransomware, whether it's the plain old encryption variety or the information stealing name and shame variety, a lot of it is still coming in through email, and a lot of attackers are playing off people's fear to get them to open email. If you get an email that says urgent, COVID vaccine related, you're more likely to click on it than if you think it's a Nigerian prince.
Well, and there's a lot of publicly available information about what's happening with COVID, specifically where the hot spots are, where the increases are, the testing rates, the positive rates of that. And I think most of us fully expect there to be all kinds of phishing to say, in this location in Iowa, if it's a hot spot, go blanket those folks. You can get the vaccine today. We will overnight it to you tomorrow and get you on the program now. Enter your credit card or whatever. I mean, that stuff's going to happen if it's not already happening.
Oh yeah, it is. And we've had other shows, Alan, where we talk about that get back to basics, and you and I have been bantering that around. But it is very true. It gets to the point here of maybe the angle that we need to take in industry is to help not overly secure an environment, but help them get back to basics so that the threat landscape doesn't get to zero, but it gets to a much smaller number, which is key. And, Alan, if you're okay with this, one variant to the conversation, Mitch, you brought up, how do you change authentication mechanisms? And we're starting to see, at least I'm starting to see in a lot of my conversations, companies try to deal with biometrics, facial recognition, for example, and having that become an acceptable way inside of an organization, let's not say corporation, just an organization, to have it be your authentication and your continual zero trust authentication mechanism as you're walking around. And there's still, I think, the problem of perception of what that can, what you can do with that information, or what is it watching? Did it see me scratch the side of my face? Did it see me messing with my hair? Or, if I'm wearing a toupee, I don't want people to know as I'm shifting it around, walking down the hallway, kind of private information. But has anybody heard if there's going to be better acceptance? Because
no, I don't think there will be better. To the contrary, Matt, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe you guys, I hear the problem with a lot of the facial recognition is inherent racism, right? It has a very hard time distinguishing black faces. And so a lot of people are shying away from using that now, right? Because you're going to have a problem with people of color, being effective or not. And if that, and I don't know if that's the case or not, because I don't know enough about the technology to know, right from wrong, truth from fact, or lie. But that's what I'm hearing. So if that's out there, how the heck can we use it? I think your basics comment is dead on, Matt. Mitchell, I'd love to live in the world where magic cadabra, they know it's Alan and the door opens for me. But that's a world of magic abracadabra. And we're not going to get to abracadabra so quickly. Call me, a stick in the mud, but I'm done chasing those magic bullets. I've spent 20 years in security looking for my next magic bullet. I don't think it's there. I think if it comes, great. But in the meantime, what can we do today? We could get back to basics. We could try to cut down the phishing. 85% of breaches are coming from known exploits, not some super duper, 0 day cooked up in a lab in Beijing or Wuhan or wherever, right? They're coming from known CVEs that we didn't patch. They're coming from people just didn't have good hygiene in their email. Can we work on that while we leave the CIA to come up with the next magic bullet, abracadabra, or M6 or whoever works on these things?
But that you have, it's a very valid point. There have been a lot of articles I've read, even as recently as this morning, that there's a lot of Homeland Security in the United States is highly recommending you patch. You have to patch, and when you look at the date they say you have to patch by, it was a week and a half ago, right? And it's like, and they're worried because people could be 6 months or a year away. Miranda, we've talked about the upticks we've seen in WannaCry. I mean,
yeah.
Right. Oh, you mean that new threat, WannaCry? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Miranda, are you still seeing that where you are?
Well, we're still seeing, companies not patched for Eternal Blue.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, no, it is. So, I think for anybody watching this saying, well, what can we do? I'm in healthcare and I'm worried. You scared me with that ransomware thing, or I'm worried about the pacemaker hack. It really starts with back to basics, right? Can we patch what we already know is out there, right? I think back, Mitchell and I, we co-founded Still Secure along with our friend Raj, and we had a vulnerability assessment and management tool. Was it 2003, Mitchell?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, early
2002. And, back then, the idea of patching, I don't even think Microsoft had Patch Tuesdays at this point.
They were just coming out with Patch Tuesday.
Right. There was a company called Citadel Hercules was the product that was sort of automated patching. DISA put a lot of money into it for the federal government. People weren't doing it then. If you would have told me, if I could, Back to the Future to 2002 and say, I'm sitting here on a Zoom video in the middle of a worldwide pandemic that no one can go out of their house. And in 2020, and we're still not patching in a timely manner, I would have said, what happened? Did we all get stupid? Right? Why haven't we solved that basic problem? And now it manifests itself in something as important as healthcare.
But whose problem is it, Alan? Here's my concern. If we rely on patching in healthcare, which I think is different than a lot of industry.
It is.
It's a lot of embedded operating systems. It's leased operating systems where you cannot patch. I mean, in my history, I've helped companies that are still running Windows NT environments because the amount of money it would take to get them off of these old systems is beyond their budgets, is beyond their capabilities. They can put controls in place to limit access to it. But Miranda, you were covering the phishing and the vishing and in those kinds of attacks. The back to basics on top of patching, Alan, to me, is education. And done in a way where you're not insulting someone, as we were joking earlier, that may believe they're better than others or smarter than others, which most likely they are. I promise you I would be a doctor if I could pass all those tests, and I didn't, if I liked the sight of blood. But, how do you help convince people? And that, it's a real psychology problem as well, that get back to basics. Because, again, if you're used to an environment that if I'm getting my email on my corporate device, this thing right here, I'm getting my email on it, and the hospital is required, or I believe the hospital is protecting me, so I should only get valid stuff on here, how do you educate them?
Do you introduce the concept of targeted training, right? Most companies do user education at least annually, but how many have you seen that are doing targeted training for medical professionals or healthcare professionals related to COVID? How many companies do you see in the lead up to a special event like the upcoming elections, training their employees specifically to look for potential attempts to exploit, concerns or worries or, whatever about the elections? Not to take off topic, but, the concept exists, targeted training, right?
Targeted, but there's two other things. I mean, something as basic as banners. The amount of pushback I've seen at companies where you flag any email that doesn't originate from your own corporate environment is flagged with external banner would cut down on a lot of people failing phishing tests, not realizing that I, the CISO of this corporation, did not just send you an email from some other URL asking you to click the link. If it says external and has my name, it's probably not me.
You mean you didn't lose your wallet in Nairobi and you need me to wire you money right away?
And I couldn't get access to corporate account.
You couldn't get access to your corporate account.
I mean, it's like, these kinds of things, and I know we're sticking in healthcare, but a lot of the message can go beyond. But in healthcare, these are the things that I think you have to start focusing on is education. And then if you can help, and Alan, I get your point around facial recognition, and I'm not a facial recognition expert. I'm not a thumbprint recognition expert. I'm also not a voice recognition expert. But I've seen plenty of technologies, especially as people adopt zero trust concepts, where you can start thinking differently. And I think, Miranda and Mitch, your points were, you can stick with the legacy, that stuff we did in 2000, 2002, 99, let's be honest, and hope for the best, or you can try to push for better, more optimal ways. And sometimes they're not, to your point, brain surgery or rocket science. One of the things that I've seen that I'm a big fan of lately is adaptive phishing training. Alan, if you get a phishing test in your organization, you pass, we're not going to bother you for 60 days. Mitch, you failed. We put 7 indicators of a phish in that email. You're going to get another one tomorrow with 6. You better not fail it.
Talk about wall of shame.
Then 5. and we're going to tie it to your HR record.
Matt, I think there's another part of this back to the basics, and we're talking largely about things that, with end users, right, that are accessing the systems. So part of my background is running a company that provided digital certificates to device manufacturers, Wi-Fi, energy, medical, network, We don't all realize it if you're not in the manufacturing world, but the authenticity of devices and the amount of kind of fakery, if you will, of people that take a device and then make one look exactly like it. And digital certificates are used to really, before something can connect, right? Even talk on a network, it has to go through that handshake. And I think that's also part of that supply chain discussion. But fundamental to that is an infrastructure that we're doing the basics in. If you're not renewing certificates, a simple thing like that, you may shut off access to the network. I've gotten call from customers saying, what happened and why is this? I didn't even know there's a digital certificate in there. And now I can't get anybody on my network. How do I get a new certificate out there? Those are basics that within the infrastructure we also have to take care of, because we can be just as impactful to not being able to get your job done, deliver a service, do some medical procedure if we don't do that.
That's very true. You know, another get back to basics that I'd be curious about, you know, we're not victim shaming here, but, you know, we tend to talk about what the end organization should be doing to fix the problems here. And one of the things we did broach in this conversation, I think really does impact and focus on healthcare, is the fact that a lot of these environments cannot be upgraded, right? They're either locked by the manufacturer, they're owned by the manufacturer, you know, oh, you don't want to be on that Windows 98 system anymore? Give us another $10 million and we're going to get you on Windows 10, and you better hope that it does an EOL in 4 years because it's another $10 million and it's a life-saving device.
Well,
so, have we ever thought about going back and pushing the manufacturers to change their protocols?
So I think, Matt, you're onto something. Ultimately, I think it is the manufacturer's responsibility to manufacture devices that can be upgraded, locked down better, that are future-proof to a certain extent. I had this, again, back in my still secure days, I remember we went to a bunch of hospitals. This was around NAC, was first rolling out network access control. And we don't think about what has an IP on a network in a hospital. But, you know, if you've ever had IV in a hospital, right, you have that IV pump. Well, that IV pump has telemetry that's showing back at the nurse's station how much fluids you're getting and so forth. That has an IP address. Can that IV pump be updated, right? And if it can't be, and I got to replace all the IV pumps in a hospital, think about it. Each one of those IV pumps, I forgot what the number was, but back then it was like a 25 or 35K a pop, because they all have to transmit telemetry. Forget pacemakers for a second. Just your basic EKG monitor, the wires they put on you, the 6 wires, and it reports in. It very rarely those stations that used to be over your bed, and you could see you always see it on TV. Do-doop, 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 do-doop. Each one of those stations could be 100K a pop, and then they still also have to report back to the central nurses station. So they're wired for the internet. If those machines weren't designed to be upgradable, patchable, poor design by the manufacturer, and it should be their responsibility. And if you're in a healthcare field, forget being a cyber person even right now, but you're responsible for, choosing these kinds of IoT devices, right? Because that's kind of what they are. And you're not picking devices that were designed with an upgrade path in place. You're as responsible for that 89-year-old lady as someone as the well, maybe not as much as the hacker, but you bear responsibility for that. Let alone, Matt, the MRI machines and the $2 and $3 million pieces of equipment. I will tell you personally, I had an ablation procedure about 1.5 years ago for AFib. And before they put me out, I was able to be in the cath lab watching all these high-tech monitors and they had my heart up on the monitor and everything. And it was like Star Trek. And thank God the doctors did an amazing job, and I haven't had a problem since. But this equipment, that's the equipment that I would expect. And I spoke to a lady who actually ran the main machine that does the doctor works the catheter, but this catheter tests the nerves around your heart and decides which ones need to be isolated. This lady, she said, I'm a dinosaur because I was a nurse before I got into this and got trained. I'm the only one I know who actually has a medical background operating these machines. Most of the people operating the machines are engineers.
A lot of times they're from the manufacturer or the vendor.
They are from the manufacturer, because the manufacturer is the only one who trains them. But those machines were designed with the internet in mind. They were designed to be upgraded. They were designed to be better secured as time goes on. I think overall we've gotten better at that. Far from perfect.
But you still have to pay. It's still expensive. And if you're an old
But that's part of it. Well, everything about healthcare is expensive.
Yeah, but you got to get the money. Governments bail out a lot of companies. Maybe it's time to not, again, I'm not trying to be inflammatory in this, but maybe it's time to bail out some hospitals to give them that upgrade. And I agree. I think, and again, I'm not going to call any medical company out, but let's be honest, a lot of companies design non-future-proof equipment on purpose.
Absolutely. It's a gravy train. I'm going to throw something out there. I'm going to throw it out for my cybersecurity friends who are watching this. If we gave as much of a crap about making our medical equipment upgradable as we care about having personally identifiable information be locked down in HIPAA, we'd have a hell of a lot more better equipment now than we do right now. And I think, have we put the wrong emphasis in here on worrying about PII as much as we do when we're losing sight of the real life and death of we need these machines to be upgradable.
Well, and they need to be current, and I mean the technology needs to be, as you said, have some future path to whether it's a new product or an upgrade of it. And it also has to be reliable. I mean, that's part of it too, right? Of course, in security is making sure that things are available. I used to have a family member who had a mammogram and the system crashed in the middle of it. Now, not a life-saving situation, but can you imagine sitting there and some computer crashes that you're like, what the hell was that thing doing? And my heart going to stop or what's going on?
To your point, Alan, if you had looked up at the screen and saw a blue screen of death, how would you have felt?
Yeah.
Pretty dead. Pretty dead. I mean, but it was amazing. But you know what? Hey, I went to see the Rolling Stones in Miami last year, and I saw Mick Jagger running around that screen. He had heart valve transplant or heart valve replacement 2 or 3 months before via a catheter. We're doing amazing things in medical, no doubt about it. Why can't we get it right about improving the security pathways for our medical devices?
So hopefully, as people start to see, to make this full circle, as people start to see that the infrastructure inside of hospitals that they've been stuck dealing with, how susceptible, and in a lot of cases, in a lot of countries, in a lot of regions of non-third world countries, how legacy and antiquated it is, how old it is. Like I said, it is not uncommon and I don't even bat an eyebrow to see a Windows NT environment, to see Windows 98, to see these legacy systems. The only one that causes me consternation these days is when I see Windows ME, because at what point did you install that? Why would you have installed that?
Or Vista.
But it is the fact that over and over and over again, what I hear is we cannot upgrade, even if I wanted to. Even if I bought Windows 10 today, it will not work on that device. That device has never been patched, ever, ever, ever. And hopefully people can start seeing that we can go at them and say patch when they can't. We can go at them and say, hey, you need to do a digital transformation. You can't. Moving it to the cloud doesn't fix the fact that the systems on-prem in that hospital are susceptible. And most hospitals that I talk to don't have hundreds of millions of dollars of liquid cash sitting around to do those upgrades. And if they have to decide between upgrading something that works, it works, to something that also works but is new and maybe more secure, or expanding a wing, adding more neonatal units, hiring more doctors, more nurses, you know which one they're going to go, because that's what they've been doing for the last 30 years.
So to your point, Matt, what do you tell a client like that? Where do you help them spend what limited resources they may have? One thing that we see a lot of is, okay, we can't patch the system, it's legacy, the manufacturer doesn't even exist anymore maybe. You can still guarantee you have visibility, right? And we're seeing a big uptick in demand for IoT monitoring, agentless monitoring, IOMT, medical things monitoring, and just making sure that at the very least you can see what's going on, because I think a large number of healthcare companies, they may have a lot of these devices in their network and they can't fix it, they can't patch it, but they also can't see it.
So Miranda, are you talking about like augmenting these devices with some sort of visibility module, even if it's like a physical thing you put on there? Because I've seen this in manufacturing now as well.
And in MSS, we work a lot with agentless partners, so you don't even need to actually install something on the device itself, but it still allows, cybersecurity professionals to gain visibility into what those devices are doing.
Discoverable. They have a fingerprint or footprint that you can recognize with it.
And you baseline, right? So you baseline and you verify that that's a good known set of traffic, and any deviation from that baseline is investigated.
I was just thinking about the patching, when I was in the device security world, they were just starting to think about doing updating of IoT and other devices, right? Now you can buy routers that will set to auto update, but how many cameras are out there? How many, let me monitor my blood pressure. There's a lot of legacy stuff there that isn't even upgradable, more or less set to upgrade its own software, or users who would even know or want to do that. It's a lot of legacy stuff there.
It's a legacy mindset. And Alan, you said something a little while ago that I really agree with. It's a mindset change, and the manufacturers have got to start thinking that way and putting cybersecurity, putting upgrade, putting monitoring in, and taking this seriously. We could have a whole conversation on cameras and how most cameras out there that you can buy off the internet are all running the same operating system, all have the same default password, all have the same protocols, and all have the same bugs, because the manufacturer wasn't interested in security, but they were interested in how cheap can I make this device and still differentiate it in the market so I could sell a bunch of them.
Well, I think take it one more step, Matt. I agree with what you're saying. Take it one more step. My observation was the fundamental change next is changing the business model, because those manufacturers make those devices, sell them, we're done. We're on to designing the next edition for next world, whatever the next year for whatever the model is going to be. They were not in the past set up to even do patching to software or even
there was no upgrade path.
Now that's part of the model. That's part of the business. You've got to do that.
Yep.
So I think the onus, instead of being placed on these hospitals, the individual hospitals, needs to be passed to the manufacturer, and it has to be that way. Hey guys, we're ridiculously over time actually, but. Yeah, but that's okay. That's okay. It's okay.
Whose turn was it to watch the clock?
It wasn't me, but I got to be honest with you. I am so thrilled that we had a discussion on cybersecurity and healthcare, and it wasn't focused on HIPAA. Kudos to all three of you.
That was the word of the day, Alan. No HIPAA.
No HIPAA. I think that's what we're going to title this one: Cybersecurity, Healthcare, No HIPAA.
I got the email. Did you all get that email? No HIPAA on the.
No, I must have missed that one. But what a great show! What a great show, Miranda. Will you come back and visit us again and add in here to the chorus?
Sure. Thank you guys for having me. Thanks for thinking of me, Matt.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Miranda. Mitchell, as always, thank you very much. Matt, what can I say? I'm sorry it took us so long to get our next episode done, but we've got another one coming up really soon. We're going to discuss why every tech vendor should have a CISO and the mysterious case of the Uber CISO.
Absolutely.
And what's happening there. So that's going to be our next one. But for now, hey, we're going to wrap this CISO Talk episode up. Miranda Ritchie, IBM, thank you for joining us. Mitchell, Matt, thank you. This is Alan Schimmel. Catch us on our next CISO Talk show. But for now, we're out.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
All right. Great episode of CISO Talk. We have a lot more CISO Talks in the hopper and filming. So stay tuned for more of that. Next up, we have Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor, doing the news, as well as a great webinar preview of the webinars we have in store for you here this week. And we also have Ofer Ha-Chen of Hunters about their latest report on the importance of threat hunting automation for XDR. So here now is our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon.
Hey everybody, happy Monday and welcome to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, managing editor at MediaOps.com, and I am here with the Monday edition of the news headlines. First up on DevOps.com, we have a deeper dive on IBM's decision to split into two companies by the end of 2021. As you've probably heard, the company is planning to spin off its managed infrastructure services unit, which basically consists of Red Hat and its Watson AI cloud, to form a new company called, wait for it, NewCo. Its focus will be on open hybrid cloud and AI solutions. In this article, Mike Vizard pulls the thread of the announcement to determine what this means for the IT market and the DevOps ecosystem, and ultimately whether this will move the needle for IBM in its quest to depend less on its legacy hardware business. By the way, NewCo is just a placeholder name. And we have Don McVitie, who is tackling the ever-expanding codebase problem. Larger code bases can mean greater complexity, and organizations are seeing massive growth in both size and the number of growth vectors. So Don parses a report from SourceGraph and Dimensional Research that looks at how and why code is getting bigger and what organizations can do about it. Interesting stuff. Definitely worth checking out. We also have an in the trenches look on how the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the way certain DevOps tools are now being used, namely the Atlassian product set. This article is written by an Atlassian services provider, and it's based on what his customers are doing to keep their wheels moving during the pandemic and work from home. As work styles are changing to reflect the new way of getting business done, so too are the ways in which Jira and other Atlassian tools are being used to promote more collaborative work. We also have news of Zero North's latest moves to advance DevSecOps, extending its platform to include integrations with Scout Suite, Aquatrivi, GitLab, and Bitbucket Server, and the configuration management database from ServiceNow. This is significant because it expands the company's ability to centrally orchestrate and manage both commercial and open source application security scanning tools. And as DevSecOps practices continue to evolve, most application development teams will end up employing multiple scanning tools just because not every tool can find every vulnerability. So this platform update also makes it easier for DevOps teams to prioritize vulnerabilities based on their severity discovered by various static application security testing and dynamic application security testing tools. Over on Container Journal, we've got lots of Kubernetes and container-related information, including a look at the relationship between Kubernetes and Apache Ignite, the open-source in-memory computing platform. It turns out the way in which they work together and the benefits that to the business application that they support really depend on whether the business application and Apache Ignite components are both in Kubernetes or if one of the components remains outside the orchestration platform. In the article, the author walks readers through each scenario and offers tips to optimize that relationship between the two technologies. We also have the latest news from a company called Shippa, which has launched an application lifecycle management platform for applications that are running in Kubernetes environments. You know, the governance model of Kubernetes is based on individual objects, which makes it challenging, to say the least, to visualize and manage. So Shippa basically creates all the required Kubernetes objects and configuration files for an application and deploys them to all clusters required. It then provides integrations with tools to manage and maintain application security, manage application availability, easy for me to say, and security. Any tools that make it easier to work with Kubernetes is A-OK with me, so I highly recommend checking out this article. Over on Security Boulevard, we have an interesting look at the dangers of backdoor technology. We've all heard about the government's efforts to enact legislation to require encryption backdoors to enable law enforcement to unlock and access the data on personal devices. But while on the surface that may sound like a good thing, you know, get the data, catch the criminal, take down the criminal organization, it could actually end up doing more harm than good. For one, it would effectively eliminate end-to-end encryption. That means no one's data is safe and privacy is pretty much out the window. For another, a government-mandated backdoor will be another vector through which hackers and cybercriminals can get access to sensitive data. If it's mandated, everyone, including the cybercriminals, know it's there. It's just a matter of finding it. It's definitely food for thought for when considering the broader implications of arming law enforcement with just another tool. We've also got another article from our legal guru, Mark Rash, that looks at the implications of paying ransomware from a legal perspective. According to the Department of Justice, if a company pays ransom for its data, it could be considered as providing material support to hackers, most of whom work for criminal organizations. Sanctions are aplenty when it comes to funding prohibited countries and entities, and paying any money in cryptocurrency to an unnamed and unknown entity could run an organization afoul of these sanctions. So it seems when it comes to dealing with a ransomware events, organizations are kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Rash offers some good advice for dealing with this tricky situation, and it's definitely worth the read. All right, that's all I have for you today. We've got lots more on the sites. Please check the sites often and daily, and I hope to see everybody tomorrow with my next edition of the news headlines. But until then, stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops, and I am here now with Ophir Harchen, who is the VP of Operations and Intelligence at a company called Hunters. Ophir, thank you so much for taking the time and speaking with me today. Really appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Charlene.
Great. So I was wondering if we could start our conversation today by you telling me a little bit about Hunters. What do you guys do?
Sure. So Hunters is a cybersecurity company based in Tel Aviv, Israel, and we're building a technology that basically revolutionizes detection and response capabilities for security operations centers today. And we're doing that by basically automating a lot of the workflows and processes that up until today we're almost entirely dependent on the human factor in the SOC. And it comprises of many capabilities, but I think the most disruptive of them is the ability to kind of automate the cognitive processes that the SOC analyst basically needs to have today. So imagine that a SOC analyst today sits in the SOC and he gets a very large number of alerts. That can be tens, hundreds, even thousands in some SOCs. And for each and every one of those alerts, he needs to make a decision. He asks specific questions, such as, what is this IP address? Have I seen it before? Who is that user? What is he doing within the organization? So there's a lot of questions that need to be asked. And up until today, those questions were very much dependent on the SOC analyst himself. So what we're doing is that we're allowing the analyst to focus on what really matters, because we're asking those questions ourselves and we're answering them ourselves. And it kind of allows us to score those alerts better and give the analyst the capability to focus on what actually matters to the SOC within that time. And I think this example is kind of a capability that in recent months has been coined as XDR, which is extended detection and response. And basically, it allows organizations to drastically decrease detection times of cyber threats and to enhance their response capabilities. And so I think that a good segue into speaking about what XDR is to maybe start with the problem. So up till a few years ago, or maybe a bit more, we started to focus on the network. You know, people said you need to have the best next gen firewall, or you need to have an intrusion prevention system with a sandbox. You need to have all these things. And that's what we used to call, you know, as defenders, the actual approach. We focused on the perimeter, and then we said focus on prevention, and then keep the bad guys out. And then as, you know, the threat landscape evolved, attackers became more sophisticated, we started to move to the cloud. Then we started to understand that we need to, as defenders, shift to an approach that's called today defense in depth. And then a very big focus within defense in depth is to have controls on the endpoint itself. And that in recent years, we allowed ourselves to reach a point where we have a lot of controls on the endpoint. And then we have a very, you know, mandatory control today that's called EDR, extended detection and response. That's the number one control that each and every organization today has. And that control basically generates a lot of security telemetry from the endpoint. And so that's a big part of the solution up until today. But again, you know, technology keeps moving forward. And today we have the cloud, we have identities, we have single sign-on solutions, we have orchestration, we have so many technologies. And so the problem with EDR is we're only seeing the endpoint. We're not seeing anything else. And so you might have an alert on your endpoint and you remediate it and then think, okay, well, we're done. But actually, what's actually happened is an adversary got to the endpoint, took credentials to your cloud, and then he connected to the cloud, and then EDR doesn't really see that. And so that kind of showed us the need to extend from the endpoint to include the entire technological stack. And that's XDR. And basically, that's an emerging new solution category in the cybersecurity market space. And it allows to improve detection and response by actually going beyond the endpoint, as we said. And I think three big things that XDR gives us is, one, visibility. We can see not just the endpoint, we can see what our users are doing, what's happening in the cloud, etc. Another one is investigation capabilities. So we're able to ask questions, not just on the endpoint. We can actually take a user and see what he's doing on the endpoint, in the cloud, on servers, etc. Right? And the last one, which is, I think, the most critical, is the ability to actually correlate. Because as we said, you know, things happen not just on the endpoint, they happen everywhere. And the ability of XDR is to show you on a graph how all of these entities connect. So that's XDR. And I think two use cases for XDR are the first one we said, where we allow the analyst to kind of focus on what matters. You know, we're scoring things for him so he saves time. And the second one is, I think, threat hunting. which is, we're taking a lot of signals. Today, a lot of security controls, actually what they do is, due to the sheer noise of some signals on endpoints, for example, then they're being discarded automatically. And so we might have a specific signal that may be an attack, but may also not be an attack. And so if we're taking that and plotting it on a graph and connecting it to other things that are related to it, then we're able to do threat hunting actually automatically.
Oh. Wow, really? That's a whole lot of information there, and it sounds like a fascinating technology. And I wonder, because we do have obviously everybody working from home these days, the network is no longer within the perimeter of the company's four walls. It's a distributed enterprise these days. Even with smaller companies, with everybody working from home, there really is, with a lot of stuff happening out at the edge with the endpoints, and I imagine there is a much greater risk for security breaches. We've been kind of hearing about that since the pandemic started. So, how does this technology actually address that? Is this something that's kind of almost like custom built, if you will, for this type of scenario, or is it something that's going to be maybe used as a complementary tool?
Right. So that's actually a great question. And I think the current situation with the pandemic really demonstrates the importance of such technology, because just one example of the many things that we're seeing is, let's take, for example, unmanaged endpoints. Mm-hmm. If you have an employee working from home and he would rather work from his personal device other than the one you gave him as an employer, then there's not going to be an EDR agent or organization sensors on his personal device. And so you can't even see what he's doing. And then when you're taking an approach of XDR and you're actually looking at telemetry and logs from your entire technological stack, then you will be able to see what that user is doing the second that he touches your resources. So I think the pandemic really shows two things. The first one is, of course, corporate security policy and the importance of adhering to these policies, so employees understand the risks of using their own devices, for example. And the second one is really to have visibility. The importance of visibility across your entire technological stack is really crucial.
Okay. All right, great. So I want to shift gears a little bit, because I know you guys just came out with a report not too long ago that that talks about maybe some of the some of the things that IT organizations are thinking about with their security efforts. So tell me a little bit about the survey and what you guys aim to do with it.
Sure. So it was basically an in-depth report that wanted to kind of form a research of how threat hunting is performed within SOCs today, and the role that it plays in really allowing SOCs to detect better and to respond better. And I think the survey, it confirmed that threat hunting is actually pivotal to SOCs today, and for not just for the SOC, for even for organizations without a SOC that are doing threat hunting. It confirmed that it's very important because it allows organizations to detect threats that they weren't aware of before. And so I think if we take XDR and the way that it allows threat hunting to be automated, then it kind of takes threat hunting and puts it to play at the heart of the SOC, and then kind of give analysts more time to do what they really need to do.
Okay. All right. Were there any results of the survey that kind of surprised you as you guys were gathering your information?
Right. So one thing that surprised me in a positive way was that a lot of the respondents said that the median dwell time for attackers today within their network is between 1 and 15 days. Now, I think that's a very good sign, and it means that we as security industry are making a lot of progress, because up until a few years ago, I think it was in 2011 when a report was released which said that the global median dwell time for attackers is over 400 days, which means that an attacker is on your network for more than a year until you detect him. And so, looking at the answers and seeing 1 to 15 days, I think that's great news. Now, granted, that's for the attacks that we do know that took place, not for the ones that we didn't. But still, I think overall it's very good news. And,
yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah. And for the things that didn't surprise me, I would say that 40%, I think, of respondents said that attacks today are still not detected by traditional security controls, such as EDR, et cetera. And I think it definitely does surprise me because attackers are getting stronger. They're getting more sophisticated. We have a bunch of new technologies coming in every day, and we can't really keep pace with them all the time. And so it kind of shows the need to kind of be on our toes, to always look to defend more and be more alert.
Right. I know that that there's a kind of a growing number of managed security solution or services providers who are really kind of coming up through the ranks to help kind of bridge the gaps for a lot of organizations. But to your point, there are a lot of new technologies that are coming out. So I imagine it can be difficult for these guys to just stay on top of the new technologies, just the sheer wealth of information that's out there right now sometimes can be overwhelming, I would imagine.
Definitely. And I think that the answer to this is, I think it starts with tone from the top. In every organization, the most important thing that needs to be on the agenda, or amongst the most important things, is security. And I think whenever, we're onboarding new technologies, then with each and every new technology, there's a new risk being introduced to the network. And we're not always aware of the risk because we're seeing how we can be innovative, but we're not always seeing that there can be a cost to it. So I think having tone from the top and having strong leadership that looks at security in a holistic way, it can be in the form of maintaining visibility, threat modeling, risk assessments even, then, always keeping pace with the new technologies that we're bringing in will allow us to actually bridge the gap.
Okay. All right. Well, Ophir, I appreciate your time, and I love the technology you guys are doing, and want to hear more about it in the future. So please keep me up to date on what's going on with you guys. Okay.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. Great. Thank you. I appreciate your time. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. Welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at MediaOps, and I'm here now with the Monday edition of the Webinars Preview. We have a lot of webinars coming up on DevOps.com and Security Boulevard, but I thought I'd let you know about 3 that are happening within the next week or so in the hopes that we can get you guys involved. First webinar I want to let you know about is called, it's the first actually in the series of AWS Partner Roundtables. It's being hosted by Alan Schimmel and sponsored by AWS. This one is happening Tuesday, October 13th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. And it features 4 panelists from D2IQ, Sysdig, Weaveworks, and AWS. And they're all going to be talking about the world of Kubernetes. So this is going to be an interesting conversation, and especially if you are kind of dipping your your toes in the Kubernetes pool, so to speak. It's going to answer a lot of questions that folks have about Kubernetes adoption, including, if you're not currently deploying a Kubernetes stack, should you? What are the pros and cons of not joining the crowd? And if you do decide Kubernetes is for you, what are some of the top tips to help ensure successful deployments? Definitely one worth checking out if you have an interest in Kubernetes, or even if you're already doing Kubernetes, have Kubernetes in your development environment, and you just want to get more comfortable with it. The next webinar I want to let you know about is called Ship Apps Faster with AWS, with unified visibility and security. This one is also happening Tuesday, October 13th. This one is happening at 3 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It's sponsored by Sysdig, and it looks at how teams are implementing a secure DevOps workflow to ship apps faster and confidently run them in production. This one is obviously all about the DevSecOps. It's going to cover how teams can automatically scan for vulnerabilities directly in AWS ECR, detect threats based on syscall data, EKS audit logs in AWS CloudTrail with the open source Falco engine, and scale Prometheus monitoring for services, including Fargate and Lambda. Lots and lots of really good information about this one. If you're using AWS and you want to know about how you can implement deeper security into the process, please give this one a look. Again, this one is happening Tuesday, October 13th at 3 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. The last webinar I want to let you know about today is called Introduction to Chaos Engineering, Finding Failures Before They Become Outages. This one is happening Thursday, October 15th at 9 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com, and it is sponsored by Gremlin. A lot of people have heard about the term chaos engineering, but perhaps you might not know exactly what it means. So this webinar is a primer of sorts on all things chaos engineering, what it is, what it does, and how it can make an organization's applications more resilient. The webinar also will cover what Gremlin calls the 5 W's of chaos engineering: what, why, when, where, and who. Definitely a webinar worth checking out if you are interested in chaos engineering, thinking about implementing it in your organization, and want to know more about the benefits of using chaos engineering. All right, that's all I have for today's edition of the webinar's preview. Please check back tomorrow, Tuesday, for the next edition. And until then, please have a great day and stay safe.
Thanks, Charlene. Great stuff today. All right, after Charlene, it's time for the Analyst Corner. And that means it's time for Mitch Ashley, CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group. And here's Mitchell with some great commentary about what's happening over at IBM as they spin out this new co, which kind of really represents a lot of their legacy business, to focus on their new business, right? Hybrid cloud, AI, stuff like that. So Mitchell has some good commentary there. And then Mitchell has a video today with Paul Magel, President Business Applications Technology Outsourcing Division at CGS. It's good stuff about supply chain. But let's now go to Mitchell Ashley, CEO, founder at Accelerated Strategies Group.
Welcome to Analyst Corner. Mitch Ashley, CEO with Accelerated Strategies Group. We had a really big announcement. I think it's a significant announcement around IBM last Friday on October 9th about the spinoff of the new co. No new name yet for this spinout. Looks like it's happening kind of further down the road. I don't think the actual spinout is complete until latter half of 2021. But it's really been interesting to see the pretty rapid transformation of IBM since they bought Red Hat, or Red Hat overtook IBM. I guess both probably happened at the same time there. But it's pretty clear that to me, it's obvious that shifting off the managed services business, which is massive. I think it's like 90,000 customers and 19 billion in revenue is what they expect the new co to be, and have a large backlog of customers in this managed service business. I would imagine that's not a very a standardized business. They're probably doing many, many things for many, many different customers. And some of those may or may not be focused on the direction of where IBM's going with the cloud and Red Hat and software and AI and things like that. So I get the split. To me, it makes sense. It doesn't eliminate IBM, their public cloud, and being in that business, which the core business that's staying is not being spun off is still $59 billion. So extremely large. IBM describes it as a hybrid cloud platform and AI company. It's interesting to me also that AI is how they're describing as one of the cloud and AI, the two technologies describing it as. But clearly there's been a massive tectonic shift in what IBM has become just in, a relatively short period of time since they acquired Red Hat. And, IBM's been through transformations before, certainly since I started working them when all they really did was the mainframe business, to shifting into services, to really kind of flipping out of being just a mainframe-centric company to even doing open source software and things like that. Eventually, all leading up, of course, to acquiring Red Hat. I'm curious to see if this better positions IBM to compete with the AWSs, the Azures of the world, because they still have cloud offerings, but now they can build the company really around the offerings that are both on-prem and in their cloud, as well as in other service providers' clouds. A whole software architecture and infrastructure that is focused on that cloud and hybrid model. And of course, they're focusing on AI as well, versus, I want to call it a drag, but versus the sort of non-standard managed services part of the business. Being a whole bunch of other things and that being a focus. So you can clearly see this is a focus move. And it makes sense to me for IBM, especially now that they've got a software platform to build the company around. So I'm expecting good things to come from this. I'm interested to see if we will see IBM elevated as to, instead of the top 3 cloud players, to really it's the top 4, if they'll make it into that upper echelon. Maybe for some people they already are. I don't necessarily see it that way. But I think it's an interesting move. So stay tuned. We'll follow what's happening as this all comes down in the market and changes continue to occur. And I think it's a healthy sign for IBM, and I think a healthy sign for our industry. Thanks for listening. Have a good day.
Hiring great DevOps and cyber talent is a huge challenge for technical teams. Cloud transformation is driving demand higher. You've tried doing it yourself. Job boards, LinkedIn, didn't work. Recruiters are an option, but who do you trust and not waste your time and money? RecruitOps is the new way to source engineering talent. From MediaOps, the people behind DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, and more. We sit right in the middle of the hottest positions in Dev, Sec, and Ops, and the brightest minds in the field. If you're looking for a great position or the talent to fill it, we can help you. Trust us, risk-free.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Well, I'm happy to be joined by Paul Magel, who is president of Business Applications and Technology Outsourcing Division at CGS, which is in the apparel, footwear, fashion industry. Paul, great to be talking with you today.
Great to be here, Mitch. Thanks for having me.
You bet. What kind of first struck a chord with me about talking with you is the whole supply chain issue. And, not an experience we haven't had before, which is going through tough economic conditions. And I've talked a lot about how supply chains is one of the challenging parts of businesses, both maintaining and rebuilding and maybe even redesigning through tough economic conditions and rebounds. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about the company and what you do there.
Look, I've been in the technology space now for over 30 years and grew up from a technology standpoint. I've been with CGS now for over 23 years. And again, at technology, we're a global information technology software and IT outsourcing firm. And I run the software group and the IT outsourcing group. We supply back office supply chain solutions to, as you mentioned, companies in the apparel, footwear, accessories, and really the whole consumer products group both on the retail side and the wholesale side. So when you talk about supply chain, and certainly now within this pandemic, it's what's on the forefront of all of our customers' minds, and what many of our solutions are being. We've done a lot of retweaking of our solutions over the last couple of months to make sure we have the immediate needs covered as our customers start to come back out of this pandemic and start seeing around the corner about what they need.
I certainly talk about it, but you hear a lot about contactless services and that being one of the big things that has changed in the delivery side of this. But what for you has been some of the biggest challenges for you or from your customers of new requirements, things you've just required to adjust to immediately, and then kind of what happens after that as part of a recovery?
Yeah, so it's been interesting, right? So when you see what happened back in January and February, which really started on the supply side as China was shut down and people couldn't get goods in and people were struggling. Then that kind of turned to a demand side problem as the retailers shut down, and now that supply opened up and people can get inventory back in, they had no place to sell it to, and no place to sell goods. And when I look at specifically to answer your question, Mitch, around what some of the things that were required, it wasn't really anything new. When I look at the pandemic, in a lot of ways, it was more of an acceleration event rather than an innovation event. Many of the retailers and the things that we're reading about with the malls and the Chapter 11s and the struggling of making a much more consumer-driven offering and products is something that people have been talking about for quite a long time, even pre-pandemic. And what they thought they had 5 years and 10 years to solve, moving to e-commerce, moving to a more distributed supply chain, moving to a much more collaborative environment, from almost sewer to showroom, has really been accelerated. And what they thought they had 5 to 10 years to do, now they have to do in 5 months. So some of the things where we've seen much more increased demand is around e-commerce connections to platforms, where wholesalers before did 70, 80, 90% of their business from big box retailers. They're trying to flip that on their head. And when those retailers are closed, how do I do 70, 80% of my business in e-commerce? So there was a lot of immediate demand from an e-commerce standpoint. We have a business-to-business virtual showrooming platform so people can sell digitally through digital images. And imagine all of a sudden all your showrooms are shut down. You can't work with salespeople, can't work with buyers. So how do you now sell in this type of environment? So the whole B2B space of how do you sell online? How do you get your buyers to know what your next season is going to look like, what your next line looks like, so they can place orders, see where those orders are. So we saw a lot of demand there as well. And again, just really across our entire suite of products, the collaboration across from vendor to supplier to consumer, a lot more interaction is required to be as efficient as possible.
It seems like, and you can tell more than I can, everybody at each stage of that supply chain everyone's trying to adjust and figure out how they react to conditions, new ways of doing business, getting to online platforms. Is it being driven mostly by the people who are selling to the retail side, or is it really kind of being pushed? You mentioned kind of China opening back up first, and then that pushing down into the people who are selling goods and services. Pardon my ignorance. I just don't know anything about this industry.
No, it's not.
I appreciate your patience with me if I ask.
No, it's not ignorant at all. Yeah, it's not an ignorant question at all. It's really being driven across every section of the supply chain, right? Because everybody has been impacted. As you said, from the supply standpoint, the manufacturers were impacted. They were shut down. Now they're back, but they've got social distancing, so the capacity is much lower. So now as the demand picks up, how do you get the same number of goods out through limited capacity? Sustainability and compliance not only was important but also important as well. So how do you make sure you have the visibility over what they're paying labor rates? You see what's happened in the UK and the EU with labor compliance and just compliance of how they're paying their workers in the factories. So that's become a big issue now. And how do you get that visibility down the factory floor? As I mentioned, on the B2B side, if you're a salesperson, you can't go visit your client. You can't bring them a sample. You can't bring them into your showroom. How do you sell along that? And then just even the financial wherewithal, as you look what happened in the pandemic, people really became cash strapped, and cash is king. So when you look at kind of the fashion world, where you would buy a ton of inventory 6 months before the actual season, put them in stores 3 months before people really needed the garments. Mm-hmm. How do you become much faster and much more not so inventory rich, because you don't want to lay out that capital. You don't want to make those commitments to the factories. You want to be much more on time and seasonless in how you bring goods to the market. They want to, see now, buy now, right? They don't want to be buying summer goods in the middle of the winter or winter goods in the middle of the summer. So, really, to answer your question, it's not an ignorant question at all. It's an intelligent question. Every aspect of that supply chain has been touched. And the only way to really solve it is through technology platforms that really can connect all of that, give you the visibility throughout that entire supply chain so you can make quicker decisions, more informed decisions. And also, I think as we look going forward, and again, I think it's more of an acceleration of what we saw coming, it's how do you get that consumer demand much earlier in the cycle? So personalization, configuration, you're seeing a lot of things coming out now from a technology standpoint where you can configure garments online and actually making them to demand rather than pre-making things and then hopefully people buy it.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that question. It seems like you're moving almost to like a just-in-time kind of manufacturing mode of rather than, big runs getting out to the distribution,
Yeah, and that's the goal, right? And then the balance is how much capacity can you do to be just in demand without leaving demand on the table versus how much can you create, but in a much more intelligent way. So things like decision support tools, business intelligence, merchandise planning and planning solutions that are taking algorithms that are trying to drive. And again, in the world today, there's no more historical trends, right? So whatever you did over the last 5 years to try to put that into a planning algorithm in the environment we're in today is really useless, right? Because the whole demand has been turned on its head. So how do you now take demand over the past couple of weeks and project out future demand so you can make buying decisions, manufacturing decisions, and those types of things? So it's a hard business to be in, just became much, much, much harder. But on the flip side, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity out there. No one goes to work naked, or no one actually sits on a blog naked. So everyone still has to buy clothes, fashion.
Not half naked anyway. I'm being away.
Yeah, exactly. And then even on the consumer goods side, you're also seeing a boom in home furnishing,
absolutely,
home goods, and all those areas. So there's a tremendous amount of opportunity out there in the marketplace. We're very bullish on coming out of this. And I think the industry will come out of this in a great way.
There always are winners, right? There's always innovation that happens. And I'm curious if you also see, you talked about, shortening that window and looking at what's happened over the last couple of weeks rather than the last 6 months or years. Is there much greater emphasis on the upfront analysis of what people are looking at, what those trends are, what the shifts that are happening, so you can try to at least do some more predictive analysis of what buyer trends are happening, in hours and days, weeks, instead of months and years?
Yeah. It's certainly upfront, right? So people are, and again, we've just announced a new planning tool, which allows you to pull a lot of data in, see the demand, what's being sold at the stores. So all of that point of sale data, as it gets sold, gets fed back into the system. So you can try to spot trends earlier in different parts of the country, or different type of garments, or different colors, whatever it may be. So to your point, all of the analytics and business intelligence tools, and now artificial intelligence to start to make some of those decisions faster and maybe actually forecast some of that demand through even artificial intelligence based on what things have seen is very important. But it's also when goods are on the floor and taking an analytical look at those types of things as well. So again, giving more visibility into what's going on, how long things take, quality control and defect type things, what's causing defects, what's not causing defects, and how you can really shorten that cycle. So, analytics, predictability, artificial intelligence are being deployed both on the supply side and the demand side and throughout the supply chain.
Super fascinating. How about, you mentioned that you've come out with a new product. Tell us a little bit about that. And I'm especially curious, is the challenge connecting to existing retail platforms to get your goods out on the market that way? Or is it building your own presence? Is it some of both?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. And appreciate you mentioning the new product. And we've had a couple of announcements. Our most recent announcement is really our Blue Cherry Next platform. And our PLM solution was the product lifecycle management, which helps the designers in the design process. And again, that whole visibility of how you build the bill of materials and how you build a consumer product, and then how you interact and you share that data, not only with the supply chain for the developers, but specifically to your question, taking all the merchandising information and product information management that we collect during that process, and then pushing it out to e-commerce platforms and being much more efficient in how we can move that data going forward. So a big tenet of the new announcement in that Blue Cherry Next platform is the openness of it. So inherent with that is APIs, so application programming interfaces, to make sure that we've got connections to the platforms, the Amazons, the Walmart.coms, whatever else is necessary out there, so they can quickly and rapidly add a platform to sell their goods online. And the same thing on the back end. We've come out and we've had over a dozen partners sign on to the platform as we go forward. 3D partners. Again, if you can't bring samples to a factory and have a fit session, how do you do that from a 3D standpoint? And those tools are becoming very, very sophisticated. And in order to make them efficient, we need to drive the grading rules and all of that product information management. And it's all got to be well connected across the system. So again, what we've announced is not only that platform, openness through APIs and with partners, but it's also a very highly configurable platform as well. So kind of a no-code environment where you can extend, and while we get an out-of-the-box solution that the industry and built with very deep industry roots for the ones that we support, you can also extend it to do more and more for your specific requirements and bring it further into the supply chain or deeper into the supply chain depending on your specific needs. We've got some great success, and we've got some webinars coming up in October to go deep dive into that new technology.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I wish you the best with the product launch and
I appreciate
with what's upcoming. So may I ask kind of a sarcastic question, but it's not totally sarcastic. But if we're accelerating, which we are, one way of version of looking at that is it's the retail stores, the brick and mortar, right? That's also accelerating, going away, obviously. If you listen to a lot of the press, you'd think Amazon will be the only place anybody will buy anything. That's the sarcastic part. What does the world look like? Obviously, that is a huge platform, and a lot of people want to be able to sell and reach an audience that way. What do you think the non-Amazon part of the world is evolving to? What does that look like?
Look, I think the world looks like, as we go forward, is really an interconnected world. All of these platforms start to interconnect and try to find the most efficient routes to the consumers. So one, I think things will become much, much more consumer driven. So if you go back to some of the things we talked about, analytics, business intelligence, but getting information from the consumer back to help then drive supply chain solutions. So watching Pinterest, being able to do mood boards and seeing where the demand is coming from, watching the influencers and drive that into your product development strategy. But also these platforms now are becoming much more interconnected. So, we're our customers, and when we do warehousing systems and distribution systems, our customers over the past number of years, very good, very efficient at shipping pallets of goods, cartons of goods out the back door. Now the majority of their shipping going forward is one product at a time, one small box at a time. So distribution strategies are having to be totally changed. An order comes in on Walmart.com, Walmart's not shipping that to you. Their wholesaler is shipping that directly to your customers. So the order is coming in through Walmart, or it's coming in through Amazon, and Amazon has many programs. It's either in their warehouse and they ship it, or they go right to the manufacturer or the wholesaler, get shipped from them. I had a situation the other day. My wife came to me and asked me what I bought from Walmart, and I couldn't think of it. I thought maybe I was, midnight sleepwalking shopping or something. But when she opened it up, it was actually something she had ordered on Walmart, on Amazon.com, that actually had been shipped out in a Walmart box. So we're also starting to see these platforms interconnect. So I don't think Amazon will take over the world, but I think you'll see a number of these platforms, whether it's Alibaba on globally and Amazon and Walmart, and then all of these specialty stores are going to start bringing on their own platforms so they can interact. And you'll see just, the term is the omni-channel. So regardless of what platform you sell on or how many platforms you sell on, if you have a brick and mortar store, if you have a catalog, they want one seamless experience so you can purchase your goods from really what's the most convenient for you. And then also, if you need to, return them in a way that's most convenient for you, to the store, through the post office, or through some other way, through a partner like Kohl's have done with Amazon, where you can buy an Amazon, go back to a Kohl's store with your Amazon returns. And very smart on the Kohl's standpoint, because when they're in that situation, they're buying Kohl's product while they're inside the store with something that they had originally purchased on Amazon.
Yeah,
So again, the world, just to bring it back, the world is going to be much, much more interconnected, and I think much more consumer driven, which will be good overall for the industry going forward. People want to buy what they want to buy at the right price and at the right time, and I think all of this technology is allowing people to do that in a much more efficient and better way.
Well, first, I'm glad to hear that it wasn't an Ambien episode or anything. You're in midnight shopping.
Yeah, me too. I thought it was just a senior moment, like, oh, maybe I did or something.
Did I do that? It sounds really almost like we're starting to really unveil that vision of, shopping anywhere, anytime, the whole internet, bringing goods and services to people wherever they are, whatever they want, whenever they want it. I mean, we're kind of really starting to see that happen. I'm curious, we cover digital transformation, things like DevOps and Agile and cloud native and all the technologies. How has your company changed how it's built software? Imagine you're not doing 2 releases a year like we used to do 10 years ago or whatever. I mean, how has that changed for you?
No. So, quite the opposite. We actually put a new release out every day internally, right? So, we provide what we call a single source code solution. So everything that we do from an R&D budgets, from our customers' requests, all get put in today's version of the software. And then when we put out a version, it allows all of our customers, regardless of where they've been on that, to upgrade to that version. Everything we've done for them is there in the software. So it's not like in the past where you would customize a solution, a new release would come out, and then they would say, that's great, you've got this new release, but I can't take it because in order to retrofit and to make all the changes I made to that software, it's almost impossible to upgrade. So this is something we started back when we initially released Blue Cherry in 2001. And that's been a great way for us to be successful, hold on to our original customers and stay with us for years and years, because they can take advantage of all this new stuff that we're investing in that's coming out of the requirements of the industry and build on it. And then specifically too, what's also changed, and we talked a little bit about earlier with your background around the cybersecurity standpoint and the infrastructure of the cloud. And it's really moving all of the software assets that we have into a cloud native environment and making things available via the cloud. I don't think it's going to be one or the other. I think on-prem still will have a role, and I think the cloud will have a role. So it's really, how do you design a hybrid solution so people can interact? Not only you interact with your cloud, but then cloud to cloud. So again, if we go back to this interconnected world, and I've got solutions of a partner of mine who has AWS, I've got other solutions of a partner of mine who are in Azure Cloud from Microsoft, I've got my own on-prem solutions. How do I make that all seamlessly interact and work, not only in an efficient way and it's maintainable and scalable, but most importantly from a secure way, because we know about all the bad actors out there who try and disrupt what we're doing and the liabilities that come from that. So again, a lot of, when you talk about DevOps, software development life cycles and infrastructure, it's how do we continue to develop software that's in a secure way that can be deployed via an on-premises model as well as in the cloud, and then seamlessly interact via APIs, queue-based technologies, and different things via browsers and those types of things, so that you can really be anywhere, your data can reside anywhere, and then you can deploy technology where it makes the most sense from a technology infrastructure side, where you've got the right technology and you're not trying to make bets on future technologies. And then you build in a way that can be moved, and you do it modular enough so you can kind of plug and play things or put things together like Lego blocks to allow you to accelerate, like we talked about during pandemics, so we can meet the needs and come up with things that are much more agile than they've been in the past, and much more quicker return on investment for our clients than they have been in the past, because that's what's required in today's world.
Fantastic. Yeah, just one kind of quick question. I want to, maybe it's more than a quick answer, but how is the apparel industry sort of from the manufacturing to the delivery end of it in terms of their sophistication around delivering software? Is DevOps and cloud fairly new? I imagine cloud isn't, of course, because of all the online retail part of it, but this shift to much rapid software delivery, is that a huge jolt to the industry, or is that we've been on this journey and now we're able to really start to capitalize on being able to do that? Where are we in that kind of level of maturity?
Yeah, so again, if you talk specifically to the apparel industry and some of the things, I think the the most common knowledge around has been that they've kind of been slow, a little bit longer and lagging a little bit from a technology standpoint. But I think in the more recent times, I don't think that's really been the case. Again, some of the things we talked about, the demand from the consumers, the demand for compliance and sustainability from both the consumer side and also governments as well, having to move online and really react to the world has really forced technology on a lot of these companies. And again, we're in a good place for that. The retailers, there's something in the industry known as chargebacks. So if you ship late or you short ship something to a retailer, they charge you for that. So the only way that the wholesalers and the manufacturers have been able to survive in those environments over the last numbers of years is by deploying technology and being much more sophisticated in what they do. So again, when this pandemic hit, obviously it was a jolt to everybody, but it was all just, again, an acceleration of a model they've already started to put in place and go forward. And again, I think you're also seeing a much more rapid advance in robotics as well on the manufacturing side. So again, if you look to where the auto industry is versus where the apparel industry is, the apparel and the fashion industry is still very labor intensive, where it's much more automated on the auto side. So I think you start seeing that those industries now starting to look to those other industries and how can they automate that more and do it in a more efficient way, again, to make sure that they continue to meet demand and do it in a way that's efficient, effective, and they can meet the consumer's demand for, better quality, lower cost, which is what I don't think will ever end, that cycle of, I want it faster, cheaper, and better than I've ever had it before.
Buyers tend to hold some things important. I think those have been proven over and over again, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the guys who figure it out are the ones who do very, very well.
Absolutely. Well, Paul, this has been really fascinating. I've learned a ton, and I appreciate the chance to hear about your new product and what's happening in this part of the industry, because it's certainly can I just imagine the buying habits and changes that have happened just in the past few months, more or less the past half year. So I wish you the best with the product launch. Keep us up to date and let us.
I appreciate it. Like I said, I've been doing it for 23 years, and there's never a boring day when I wake up. It's constantly changing and constantly challenging, but it's what keeps us going.
I share that experience too. So again, thanks.
Mitch, thank you.
CI/CD pipe and put your observability on. Ground control to Major Tom. 10, 9, commencing countdown, engines on. 6, 5, check ignition and make God's love be with you.
Great stuff, Mitchell. Thanks for joining in today. Guys, that's going to call it a wrap on today's show for Monday, October 12th. We hope you had a great weekend. We hope your week is off to a good start. We hope you enjoyed a lot of this great content that we brought to you today. We'll be back tomorrow with more fresh content, great news, great information, great interviews. We also have a great DevOps Unbound episode for tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. But until then, this is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV, hoping that you're safe, you're well, you're strong. TechStrong. Take care.